Quiet, please. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the New York City hybrid hearing on the Committee on Aging, jointly with the Committee on Immigration. Please silence all electronic devices. At no time, please do not approach the dais. If you have any questions, please raise your hand, and one of us, the Sergeant at Arms, will kindly assist you. Thank you for your kind cooperation. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Thank you so much, and good morning. I'm Councilmember Crystal Hudson, Chair of the Committee on Aging, and my pronouns are she, her. Welcome to this morning's joint hearing on the needs of immigrant older adults in New York City. I want to thank Chair Aviles and the Committee on Immigration for joining us for this hearing on this critically important topic. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we've been joined by Council Members Hanif and Mealy. New Yorkers take pride in the rich diversity of our city. With immigrant communities hailing from over 150 countries, people arrive in New York City every day to create new lives, build new careers, and raise their families. And just as almost 40% of New York City's population are immigrants, almost 40% of the members of this city council are immigrants or the children of immigrants themselves. So I know that today's oversight topic is personal to many of my colleagues and to me. As we take pride in our council and our city's diversity, we must also take responsibility to ensure that every immigrant New Yorker, whether they have lived here for 20 years or for 2 weeks, has meaningful access to the resources and services they need to live with dignity. This especially includes our immigrant older adults who face the intersecting challenges of aging and navigating unfamiliar languages, systems, and processes to access goods and services. Over the past decade, according to the Center for an Urban Future, New York City's older adult population has become more diverse than ever. Across the 5 boroughs, the older immigrant population increased by 49% in the last decade. And in Staten Island, it grew by 67%, which is the fastest rate in New York City and the second fastest among all counties in the state. Today, older immigrants make up 31% of all older adults on Staten Island. In Queens, the older immigrant population increased by 60% compared to the US-born older adult population, which increased by 14% over the last decade. In Manhattan, the older immigrant population increased by 43% compared to the 27% increase among US-born older adults. Immigrants comprise 40% of Manhattan's older adult population, which is the 3rd highest share of any county in New York State. In the Bronx, the older immigrant population increased by 30% over the past decade. And in my borough, Brooklyn's older adult population growth is largely driven by the 46% growth in the older immigrant population, which increased 24% over the last decade. Immigrants currently comprise 58% of Brooklyn's entire older adult population. Meanwhile, the number of Black, Hispanic, and Asian older adults has outpaced the older white population, and the population rate of immigrant older adults in the city is growing faster than that of New York-born older adults. Queens, for example, has the second most diverse older adult population in New York State. 35% are white, while 25% are Asian, 20% are Hispanic, and 16% are Black. As this committee has previously discussed, immigrant groups with the fastest growing populations of older adults are also among the poorest in New York State. While the statewide poverty rate for older immigrants is 17.5%, a decrease from 19.3% in 2011, poverty rates have increased in several parts of New York State. This includes Staten Island, where the poverty rate among older immigrants increased from 8.4% in 2011 to 13.5% in 2021, and the Bronx, where the poverty rate among older immigrants increased from 25.1% in 2011 to 29.8% in 2021. These statistics underscore the urgency with which the city must act to address the needs of immigrant older adults, and particularly low-income older adults and older immigrants of color. This includes helping immigrant older adults secure food assistance, find affordable, accessible housing, and schedule visits with culturally competent healthcare providers. To aid in this massive effort, I've put forth legislation today to require NYC Aging to make information available to older adults about NYC Care, the NYC Health and Hospitals Initiative to provide no-cost primary care to uninsured New Yorkers, regardless of immigration status. As our city's immigrant population ages and as older adults migrate to NYC, we must make every effort to connect them with high-quality, language-accessible, and culturally competent health care. I look forward to reviewing my proposal with the administration today and working together to better connect immigrant older adults with the care they need. Today, the committees hope to learn about the ways in which NYC Aging and Moya, in coordination with other city agencies, work to connect New York City's rapidly growing immigrant older adult communities with essential benefits and services to which they are eligible. The city must make data-informed investments and policy decisions that reflect the urgent needs of this rapidly growing population, and I look forward to discussing the ways in which the city is planning to meet their needs in the next year, the next decade, and beyond. Thank you to representatives from the administration for joining us today. Thank you to my colleagues and Aging Committee members, and thank you again to Chair Aviles and the Committee on Immigration for joining us. I would also like to thank my staff, Casey Addison and Andrew Wright, and Aging Committee staff, Christopher Pepe, Chloe Rivera, Julia Haramis, and Samuel Hamid. I also want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Schulman on Zoom, and I'll now turn it over to Chair Aviles to deliver her opening remarks.
Buenos dias, good morning, and welcome to today's joint hearing of the Committees on Aging and Immigration regarding the needs of older immigrant adults in New York City. I am Councilmember Alexa Aviles, and thank you, Councilmember Hudson, for pronouncing my last name beautifully, Chair of the Committee on Immigration. And this is our first hearing of on this critically important issue for this committee. And so I'd like to begin by thanking Speaker Adrienne Adams for trusting me to be chair during this critical time in New York City's history for our immigrant community neighbors. I would also like to thank my co-chair, Councilmember Crystal Hudson, for co-chairing this hearing and for her leadership on addressing the needs of older immigrant adults. I would also like to thank everyone joining us today, and especially Councilmember Hanif for being here with us, and Councilmember Schulman. I'd like to thank representatives of the administration and the public, including all of those attending remotely. Today, the committee will be conducting oversight on city program services and outreach tailored to older immigrant New Yorkers. And as you've heard the statistics that Councilmember Hudson, they do bear repeating. According to the Center for Urban Future, the older adult population aged 65 and older is the fastest growing segment of New York State's population. In the city, the older immigrant population is also the fastest growing. Across the 5 boroughs, the older immigrant population increased by 49%. In fact, immigrants are a majority of New York City's 65 and older population. Reporting shows that many older immigrants in New York City are struggling. Despite toiling in our restaurants, construction sites, laundromats, and other workplaces for years and even decades, many have no nest egg to ease them into what should be their retirement years. Instead, those with no savings simply continue to work to survive. Older immigrants also tend to receive less in Social Security income than US-born residents. Those who are undocumented are not eligible to collect any amount, and some older immigrants also receive limited help because of language and cultural barriers. Public reporting has shown that some older immigrants have already slipped into poverty and homelessness, and that more will continue to follow unless city leaders find ways to help them. Moreover, many older immigrant New Yorkers are coping with social isolation and grappling with the deleterious effects on their mental health. These unique challenges facing a rapidly growing population demand compensatory programming, funding, and services to help older immigrants not just to survive, but to thrive in their communities. So today, we are eager to hear how the administration is meaningfully resourcing and scaling these programs, like We Speak New York City, Action NYC, New York City Care, to reach and serve this population. We will ask DFTA and Moya on how they collaborate to serve older immigrant New Yorkers and hear from the agencies about their advocacy to serve related to legal services, food security, and housing access. We are interested in learning about tangible action items for which council members can advocate and ensure that we are effectively serving the older immigrant community members. So we look forward to learning more from the administration, from advocates, providers, impacted immigrants, about current efforts to ensure that our older immigrant New Yorkers are not forgotten and that they are treated with dignity and honor. More than ever, we must prioritize resources for these New Yorkers who have raised families in our neighborhoods, who have led our communities, and enriched our great city. New York City is a city of immigrants, and we look forward to sustaining that reality for generations to come. And so I would like to thank committee staff for their work on this hearing, including Nicole Cata, Legislative Counsel Rebecca Barrilla, Policy Analyst Nia Hyatt, Finance Analyst Florentine Cabor, Unit Head, and I'd also like to thank my staff, Chief of Staff Edward Cerna, my Legislative Budget Director Christina Bottego, Legislative Fellow Amarachi Nangadi, and our Communications Director Emmett Turan, and everyone working, honestly, in the background to make these hearings work and to make our city run. Now I will turn it over to my co-chair, Councilmember Crystal Hudson.
Thank you so much, and I will turn it over to Committee Counsel to administer the oath.
Thank you, chairs. Good morning. Could the representatives from the administration please raise your right hand? Sure. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? I need a verbal yes, please. Yes. Thank you. You may proceed.
And I do apologize, just right before you start, I want to acknowledge that we've also been joined by council members Banks and Botcher. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson Hudson and Aviles and members of the Committees on Aging and Immigration. I'm Anya Erasme, Associate Commissioner for the Bureau of Community Services for the New York City Department for the Aging. Joining me here today is Penny Vacharapapan, our General Counsel at New York City Aging. Additionally, we are pleased to be joined by Mio Sotis Munoz, the Deputy Commissioner for External Affairs, and Miguel Santana, Chief of Staff from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today and discuss this incredibly important subject. I'm happy to share some of the current highlights from New York City Aging and our work with immigrant populations and discuss the ways that as an agency we achieve cultural competency in all areas. New York City Aging is tasked with serving New York City residents over the age of 60. Our goal is to ensure that any older adult can walk into any older adult center, also known as an OAC, and call our in-house helpline, Aging Connect, to be referred to a program they may qualify for or receive some service to assist their lives and combat social isolation, regardless of their background, immigration status, or preferred language. There are 1,775,783 older adults living in New York City, meaning slightly more than 1 in 5 New York City residents is over the age of 60. Overall, New York City Aging's population is growing and will encompass more than 40% of all New York State residents in the future. We need to focus on addressing populations in need and closing funding gaps with the state. According to the American Community Survey, in 2022, 3,065,136 New Yorkers were foreign-born, or around 36.7% of the city's population. For those over the age of 60, there are 1,023,698 who are foreign-born, or close to 58% of all older adults. This is a larger fraction than is seen in the under 60 adult population and greater than all of New York State's older adult population. Older adults in New York City are less likely to be white, more likely to speak a language at home other than English, more likely to live alone, be considered frail, and receive SNAP benefits when compared to the overall population of older adults in the United States. In short, we know that older New Yorkers are more likely than their counterparts in other cities in the United States to live alone below the poverty level, experience some kind of language barrier, and require some kind of public assistance. The need to ensure that aging services meet the wide range of needs for older adults is a paramount goal for New York City and this administration. After all, any older adult of any background with any citizenship status is able to access meals at an OAC or other programs provided by New York City Aging as long as they are 60 or older, and in some cases 55 or older in particular workforce programs. Because our goal is to reach every older New Yorker, we have been following the current migrant crisis situation in New York City as we collectively address the many asylum seekers crossing our southern border. It is our understanding that a majority of asylum seekers are not older adults, and those who arrive in New York and are over 60 typically are quickly connected with family and are not navigating processes on their own. Nonetheless, we continue to work with our partners and New York City Emergency Management, DOH, and Health and Hospitals as they navigate this current crisis. New York City Aging offers a wide range of services for all adults over 60, regardless of immigration status. Our case management, home-delivered meals, caregiving, elder abuse, friendly visiting, legal assistance, transportation, geriatric mental health, and of course, our OACs, or older adult centers, do not deny services based on residency or immigration status. Furthermore, we work continually to be inclusive of an individual's background, language needs, and culture, because that is how we build a more age-inclusive city as New York City's aging population grows in the future. New York City Aging Services follow guidance from Local Law 30 of 2017 regarding language access, and we provide translation services through Language Line for Aging Connect, as well as a host of other programs. This year, as part of our annual plan summary hearings, which occur yearly and are the public's opportunity to weigh in on New York City Aging Services, we translated the summary report into Spanish and Mandarin Chinese. This is not a requirement of the report, which is determined by the state. However, we are committed to ensuring that as many older adults as possible can give comment and share their thoughts on the services we provide. Additionally, in conjunction with Mayor Adams, we have hosted a series of 9 older adult town halls at our centers throughout the 5 boroughs, beginning last August. Many of these have been bilingual with translation in communities where older adults may not be English proficient or may be more comfortable speaking a different language or come from an immigrant background with particular needs and concerns. These events have allowed us to expand our reach into more immigrant communities and really bring together partner agencies to better serve older New Yorkers. At our first town hall in the Bronx, at Bronx Works Morris Heights, 75% of the older adults in attendance preferred to speak Spanish, so the table discussions with older adults as well as the larger town hall portion were conducted both in English and Spanish. At this particular town hall, there were questions about immigrant services and benefits, which we were able to answer or direct people to the appropriate resources. A paramount goal of New York City Aging is to strive for cultural competencies in all our services and ensure that older adults, regardless of their background, can connect with our programs in a way that makes them feel most comfortable. In particular, we are proud of where our meals and OAC programming has come when considering the cultural needs of a particular neighborhood. Our own staff are assigned based on the culturally competent backgrounds they bring to the table when those considerations can be made. This helps to ensure that program evaluation is executed with an understanding of the unique cultures in the community they are serving. In early 2023, we worked with Council to develop what ultimately became Local Law 19, which requires OACs to identify the languages spoken in the surrounding communities and tailor programming to those relevant languages or cultures. Many of our programs were already doing this, and we have worked to include more culturally competent language into subsequent requests for proposals, or also known as RFPs, to ensure that whatever an older adult's background or programs can serve their specific needs. Meal provision is a large portion of the work that New York City Aging undertakes every day. We are proud of the great work our contracted providers, whose mission it is to serve the unique and nuanced needs of older adults in the specific communities they serve. New York City Aging meals are offered in a wide range of options, including halal, kosher, and Pan-Asian, which seeks to address the cultural and dietary needs of clients. These meals are available at the OACs, depending on what their immediate community's cultural needs are. The HDM program providers are required per their contracts to serve culturally relevant cuisines to clients receiving those meals. Different community boards throughout the city make up various catchment areas for home-delivered meals providers and are required to provide meals for those cuisines. This includes kosher, halal, Latin, Chinese, Caribbean, Russian, and other cuisine types. The populations that make up those communities are considered when cuisine types are determined. The case management program also requires cultural competency and is part of the standards required for employment in those programs. Case management providers are going into people's homes and making specific evaluations about their lives and abilities with the ultimate goal of meeting the client where they are. In order to do that, they must understand the specific cultural considerations which may factor into their current situation. Because case management is the first step in receiving meals through the home-delivered meals provider, the case manager should understand that individual's cultural background to better provide the meals which are contractually required as an HDM provider. While we strive to further include culturally appropriate considerations into other programs, we recognize the immediate importance of meals and the center programming and have, of course, prioritized those areas. Additionally, the geriatric mental health program, which operates within our OAC network, has expanded in the past 2 years to include 88 sites across the city, with a high priority put on neighborhoods which are in need of these services. This includes communities which have been historically underfunded or need additional investment to meet growing needs. Our geriatric mental health sites were identified with these needs in mind, surrounding mental health and access with which communities, like newly arrived immigrants, need in order to live successful and full lives. Center staff and mental health providers in these neighborhoods reflect the overall needs of communities which surround those locations and may be multicultural, bilingual, and able to understand those unique experiences. The clinicians speak English, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian, Ukrainian, and Italian. Beyond meals and languages spoken at centers, the Geriatric Mental Health Program offers a glimpse into ways in which New York City Aging is serving immigrant older adults. I know that today's hearing is also discussing the pre-considered introduction to direct New York City Aging to make information available to older adults about the New York City Care Program in our centers or program offices and the New York City Aging website. Our goal remains to ensure that all older adults, regardless of language needs or cultural background, can access the information they need to address critical issues in their lives and successfully age in place within their communities. As we continue to review this bill, we look forward to discussing this legislation with Council in the future in our shared goal of sharing information and working with partner agencies. These are just some of the ways that New York City Aging is working to serve the needs of New York City's older adult population who are immigrants to this country. We are pleased to provide culturally competent programs and resources for this vulnerable population and look forward to continuing to adapt to the needs of this community in the future. I'm grateful to Chair Hudson and the Aging Committee for your continued advocacy and partnership and support for this important community of older New Yorkers. I acknowledge that while this is a hearing about the needs of immigrant older adults and the population of immigrant older adults is diverse, we are working through a migrant crisis right now in New York City. I look forward to sharing information on what New York City Aging does to serve immigrant populations. However, I would like to acknowledge that our partners at the Office of Asylum Seeker Operations, New York City Emergency Management, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and Health and Hospitals are more directly involved in the day-to-day operations of processing the many thousands of asylum seekers crossing the southern border and arriving in New York City. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to also acknowledge that we've been joined by Council Members Lee and Joseph.
No.
Okay, we're just going to jump into some questions, if that's okay. Can you please describe the ways in which NYC Aging collaborates and coordinates with Moya to serve older immigrant New Yorkers?
Yes, so we're very proud of the Cabinet for Older New Yorkers. That's the one main way we work with a lot of sister agencies, and Moya is a partner in that in the Cabinet. And Moya can talk a little bit more about some of the projects that are coming out of that Cabinet.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much. And again, good morning, esteemed Chairperson Aviles and Hudson and members of both committees. I am Deputy Commissioner, and I am here joined also by Chief of Staff Miguel Santana. Moya connects with immigrant New Yorkers on a local, state, and also with federal programs, including the New York City Aging Department. We participate in monthly engaged virtual meetings with also the New York City Aging Department and other services to make sure that we're also introducing a new program that will allow us to provide more Know Your Rights presentation with language support and interpreters.
Okay, thank you. According to a 2023 Center for an Urban Future report, New York City's older adult population has become more diverse than ever, and the population of older immigrant New Yorkers is growing faster than that of native-born adults. What are NYC Aging's projections for the growth of NYC's foreign-born older adult population?
Good morning, Chairs Hudson and Aviles. New York City Aging recently updated our U.S. and New York City older adult population comparison for 2023 and our profile for older New Yorkers, which is published on our website, both of which, as I said, can be found on our website. Those reports detail the various demographics of the current older adult population. Our agency definitely has our finger on the pulse of the older adult population currently. And the older adult population in the 5 boroughs as it is now. However, we currently rely on the New York City Department for City Planning, as well as the U.S. Census Bureau and the American Community Survey to determine projections in the future. moving forward. So we cannot specifically say what the estimates are for the older adult population in the future for the foreign-born, but we do know that by 2040, more than 1 in 5 New Yorkers will be an older adult, and that the older adult population in New York City will be more diverse than the U.S. older adult population. Older adults in New York will be far more likely to speak a language other than English at home. So, as I said, we're not the experts on data in terms of projections, but we do have a finger on the pulse for current data.
Thank you. I can appreciate that. And, considering that you've got your finger on the pulse, I'm curious to know in what ways has NYC Aging and Moya adjusted your services and programming to account for the unique needs of the changing demographic that you just mentioned?
So with our partners at City Council, we've worked as part of Local Law 19 of 2023 to identify the communities served by our older adult centers and then notify the center about the prevalent languages in that area. We've also made this a requirement of our past RFPs for the OACs and NORCs, which are naturally occurring retirement communities. We strongly believe and agree with council that providers need to know the communities they serve and have cultural competencies, I can't say that word, competencies, to address or to provide those services, which includes multiple languages, but also in the programming that they do, that it is culturally appropriate and relevant to the clients of that program.
Thank you for that. And then just in the same vein, we shared statistics about the growth specifically in Staten Island, which, just to repeat, the older immigrant population across the 5 boroughs has increased by 49% over the past decade, but it's grown by 67% in Staten Island alone, which is the fastest rate in New York City and the second fastest among all counties in the state. Has NYC Aging adjusted any of its programming or services by borough to accommodate this change in demographics? You alluded to a little bit of it, but if you could just be more specific.
So this goes back to our work in requiring that the OACs understand the types of communities that they serve. And as we've stated before, it's part of our RFPs for the OACs and NORCs because, again, we strongly believe that the providers need to know the communities. This is also a requirement of the individual centers, and we appreciate the flexibility that we can work with the programs to design what's necessary for them to go beyond the basic requirements of the RFP. This relationship between New York City Aging and the provider is indicative of the intensive program contract management services that we use for oversight.
Thank you. While Social Security and Medicare have been responsible for keeping many older adults out of poverty, these programs are less accessible to immigrant older adults. In what ways is the city looking to improve access to the safety net for this portion of the city's older adult population?
Well, we understand that there are gaps in federal benefits for older adults, and we always advocate for benefits for older adults, of course, in the federal space as well. That is unfortunately not something that our agency can address. We always advocate, of course, but the services that we offer to older adults are only city services, and we always address what gaps we can, but the federal benefits, unfortunately, are often only available to recipients, are only available to U.S. citizens. Whenever there are gaps, we do connect our clients to agencies that can connect them to other agencies to make sure that they can receive the benefits that are available to them. But unfortunately, for some federal benefits, such as Social Security, SNAP benefits, things like that, some of those benefits are unfortunately only available to U.S. citizens.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned advocating. Can you be a little clearer on what exactly does that mean? Who are you advocating, or what form and shape is that taking? And then also, you mentioned referring to agencies. What agencies are you referring to, in what context? So I guess what I'm looking for is just a little bit more clarity on who are you referring to if these services don't exist?
So we always refer to our sister agencies, particularly to HRA, who The Older Americans Act reauthorization is working with Senator Gillibrand and HRA. So we are always advocating on the state and federal level. And in terms of sister agencies, my colleague has mentioned the cabinet. So we always are working with our sister agencies. We always refer to
Right. It really depends on the needs of the, obviously every individual's needs are different, so depending on the needs of the individual, we will, our programs will refer to the appropriate agency, but that could be a variety of resources. Our goal is always to meet the clients where they're at.
Okay. Just since you mentioned the Cabinet for Older New Yorkers, again, I just want to know specifically from either agency if you feel that the cabinet has impacted the ways in which the city serves older immigrant New Yorkers.
Good morning, Chair Hudson
Morning.
and Aviles. In terms of how we collaborate, yes, the cabinet I think is very instrumental because it gives us an opportunity to collaborate, to assess, what the different agencies can provide to support this particular community. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to continue doing that work. We've been doing that work, and I think moving forward as this population grows, we'll be able to provide better services moving forward.
Okay. What does language access look like at older adult centers, and what languages are available? I know you addressed some of this in your testimony. Are multiple languages available at different locations, or is it that specific locations based on population data, focus on one language, maybe two?
Sure. So all of our programs are required to have a language access service. Oftentimes, like Language Line is one example, so that anybody who walks into the door can be helped in the language of their preference. But on top of that, part of what I mentioned with the RFPs is we chose providers based on their ability to serve the communities, and a lot of them come from the communities. And so there's an expectation that the staff will also speak the languages of the majority of the population. So there's two parts. So there's the staff that usually represent the community, but then also in case there is somebody who walks in with another need that, they can't speak every language, of course, they are required to have a language service available.
Thank you. And I want to acknowledge that we've also been joined by Council Members Brewer and Krishnan. Can you please describe any culturally competent programming available at the older adult centers, and how are culturally aligned meals determined for each center?
Yes, I could actually talk about this for a long time.
Take as long as you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. So February was just, actually we had the Lunar New Year and Black History Month, so most, if not all of our programs did the programming around that. That's one example. A lot of programs also take into consideration, well, not all, I mean, a lot, all of the programs really take into consideration the needs of the clients. So clients have input. We have advisory councils which give input into programming. And so it's, that helps to also meet the cultural needs, whether it's playing ping pong or line dancing or a bomba class, or, the list goes on and on. But what I also think is very special is that a lot of the centers celebrate cultures that are not their own. So like a lot of centers will celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and it's not, they might not have any Irish clients, but they are really honoring the culture of different groups. So that's also, I think, a really nice touch that a lot of our programs do. And I think you asked about meals as well?
Yeah, how are culturally aligned meals determined for each center?
So for our centers, we are a little less rigid. We ask that they provide menus that are based on, that meet the needs of their constituents. However, with the HDM programs, it's actually in their contracts to have a variety of cuisines available, and so the clients can choose their which menu they would like, and so that that depends on the threshold of how many clients in that borough or contract area.
Great. Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Chair Aviles for some questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Hudson. I wanted to go back to the cabinet for a quick second before I jump in. You mentioned certainly its value is in the collaborative space that the cabinet allows, but can you give us an example of a tangible change and impact that came out of that space that you saw through?
Well, most recently, we've been focusing on this NYC Care initiative, and the objective there is to better facilitate services to the immigrant communities, regardless of age. And so this has given us an opportunity to reevaluate the program itself and also figure out ways where we can improve upon it. So I think that's a tangible example of a given program that we're working on.
So what kind of changes did that include?
Well, that just requires additional outreach that, I'll allow my colleague to further expand on that in terms of reaching out to the community, providing resources, information packages, and collaborating with sister agencies to ensure that we're meeting the needs of immigrant New Yorkers. And I'll turn it over to my colleague here to speak more on the Boots on the Ground initiative.
Thank you so much. Well, the outreach team, which is part of our external hands-on and making sure that we're collaborating not only with our sister agencies, but with city, state, and federal programs. One of the positive nature of us participating is that our Boots on the Ground and our constituency services hotline is able to receive concerns and is able to relate that concern of the immigrant community so that we're able to provide real-time information to not only our sister agencies, but a lot of the organizations that we partner with across the board. So every day we assist with referral and resources that are made available in the respective language, and this is made possible because the Boots on the Ground, our outreach team, is in the community every day, helping build trust and collaborating with community-based organization. The immigrant community is a very unique community. It's a community where you have to be very hands-on on the ground, and this is why it is so critical for our services and external affairs to be working out there every day, being able to assess the needs in real time and being able to communicate those needs. At the same time, our office also works with engaging other members like the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, Social Security at virtual meetings, and working with other members of our sister agencies like the New York City Department of Aging to make sure that we are providing the resources, but also being able to do it in a way that is very sensitive to those particular communities that we are interfacing with. So one example would be that there were a lot of permanent residents who were not applying for Social Security because they were under the impression that they have to be U.S. citizens. So you could imagine all these permanent residents who've put in so much time, 20, 30 years working, and would not go out there and apply for Social Security. And this is the kind of information that we're able to provide in the appropriate cultural setting. We go out there, we participate in events. We even instituted a new system within MOYA to make sure that we're even more accessible to hard-to-reach areas. In 2022, we redefined our community event request links that really enhances the ability for trusted community groups to reach out to us and share with us things that, for the most part, a lot of immigrants don't feel comfortable disclosing because, of course, self-identifying is optional. And through these CBOs, we're able to identify the areas of needs and the kind of languages and sister agencies that we would need to bring with us to the field. Our goal is to bring City Hall to the community, and it's the only way we're going to continue to expand and ensure that our immigrant New Yorkers are able to be prioritized, as we can all understand in terms of our commitment.
I have one more example as well to answer your question. MOYA leads immigrant media roundtables to ensure effective information dissemination. The roundtables facilitate information flow to the immigrant community via hyperlocal newspapers, radio, and TV stations in their language. The roundtables also strengthen relationships with immigrant-focused media outlets. In the last year, we have worked with New York City Emergency Management, New York City Care, NYC Care, Department of Youth and Community Development, NYC Small Business Services, Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, Office of Technology and Information and Innovation, Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, and more is working with New York City Agency to host a roundtable in support of older immigrants.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. In terms of, does Moya have additional data on where older immigrant New Yorkers live within the 5 borough?
So, yeah, I'm gonna speak on that real quick. Let me just get this, okay. Okay, so Moya's priority is to build trust with the many immigrant communities that make up New York City. That's why our team is highly sensitive to the hesitancy of community members in sharing their personal identifiable information. Hence, all data collection efforts with Moya are completely optional. Our team collaborates with the Center for Economic Opportunity to analyze the Census Bureau's American Community Survey data. This helps us to enhance our interactions with immigrant community members. By utilizing this data, we have confirmed that we have observed on the ground that immigrant enclaves exist throughout New York City. You want to add to that? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think I heard you say, we know immigrants are there in enclaves, but we're not collecting data because of the sensitive nature. Is that correct?
I mean, the data that we're able to collect, I'm
You
sorry.
said a lot of words. I just think is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of, actually, you know what? I'm going to pause there and turn it over to my colleagues. I know some who have time constraints, and then we'll pick it up.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to pass it over to, yes, Councilmember Hanif.
Thank you so much, Chairs Hudson and Aviles. So just picking up on just that question, and I was hoping for a more disaggregated data response as well, but we know to be true that South Asian seniors are one of the largest groups of immigrant seniors in New York City. Can you speak to how else beyond holiday celebrations DFTA is providing support to these communities? What more concretely, how you're identifying providers, what kind of evaluations or what the parameters are for DFTA funding for these providers?
Sure. So as I mentioned, there's an expectation for all of our programs to be culturally competent. So any area that, or any center that's located in an area with predominantly South Asian older adults is expected to serve that population. Off the top of my head, one agency comes to mind, India Home, which is a very large provider. They were previously a discretionary program, and they serve hundreds of older adults every day. And I believe they have 3 locations. They're just one example of a provider who is, specifically geared towards that community of older adults.
And what else are you learning? I mean, I know about India Home, and I'm a first generation Bangladeshi, and I've been hearing about India Home for at least the last 15 years. But my community, the community I represent, is in Brooklyn. And if I ask these folks to go to Jamaica, that is about a day trip. Coming back and forth is an impossible journey. So would love to know how DFTA is either identifying new partners, how DFTA is supporting capacity building of groups like India Home to be able to come into neighborhoods like Kensington in my district. And I just have 2 more questions, which I'll just share out and then would love responses because I'm short on time. Can you share what the agency is doing to combat anti-Asian violence? We know that seniors are doubly, triply being impacted by anti-Asian hate. And it is really hard to see our Asian community bear the brunt of these attacks. Would love to hear what the agency and our mayor's plans are to combat and reduce the attacks. And then I know that there are more than 300 older adult centers. How do you get our aging community into these centers? What does the outreach look like? Thank you so much.
Sure. So beyond cultural competency, obviously, which includes, of course, being sensitive to the needs of different older adults, and anytime any new issue arises, such as the violence against Asians, we do our best to address those, and I think our providers do a very good job of having community conversations about those things, and showing that these centers are a safe place for people to go. We don't ask for people's background, we don't ask for immigration status, nothing like that. So we want people to feel comfortable in our programs. We also have elder justice programs, so if anybody is a victim of a crime, we can serve them through another program, a referral to our elder justice providers. And we also recently began working with the NYPD to have an older adult liaison in every NYPD precinct, which we're very proud of. So those are our NYPD officers who are trained to work with older adults and being sensitive to their needs. So that's another way we can support any clients who are victims of abuse or any kind of crime.
If I could just follow up, chairs. Do you have any reporting on how many of our seniors are reporting instances and incidences of attacks in this NYPD program that you just described? Because many of our seniors who are limited English proficient are also unlikely to report instances. And we've seen that. And so I would like to see and better understand what this administration's plans are, particularly in this climate,
Yes.
As we see more and more of our constituents bearing the brunt and reaching out to our offices for support. And we'd like to be able to provide more capacity to the providers that are very limited in resources and want to partner with the agency to be able to really make sure that there's recourse in events of attacks.
I'm not sure if we have specific data on how many of those specific crimes. I'm confident that our elder justice programs do track how many people they assist and the different ways they assist them, but I'm not sure that we have specific data on what types of the crimes there are within that, and I don't believe the NYPD necessarily shares that information. What our goal with them is more to make sure that they are trained to appropriately meet the needs of any older adult who comes in. But the elder justice programs they're available to any older New Yorker, so they don't necessarily need to be located. They cover all boroughs and all areas, so they can be any OAC, NORC, any of our programs can refer to those programs if they have a client who's experiencing an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So to go back to the data question, does Moya have any other additional, more nuanced data that sheds light on the unique needs of older immigrant New Yorkers as distinct from their U.S. counterparts?
So, I mean, we have a system in place to track all types of requests. We have, as mentioned previously, an event request link that is open to the public to provide us with information on support that they're looking for. So that's one mechanism that we use to receive inquiries. The second mechanism that we use is we have the Ask Moya hotline, where constituents can call at any point, at any time, share whatever information, and from that information that we gather, we're able to put together some data, that gives us a sense of what the needs are, what the requests are, in terms of language access requests, in terms of the services that they're looking for and the support that they're looking for. From that data, we can try to assess, the different levels of population, but that's based on a self-identifying optional item in terms of our request to them, and that's if they provide us the year of birth. We cannot mandate that, and we won't do that, because we don't want to compromise the trust that they have to reach out to us. So we're very mindful of being very careful in how we manage those situations. We welcome them to provide us that information, because obviously if they provide us at least the year of birth, we can disaggregate the information and be able to focus our services more specifically to older adults.
So can you tell us, what do you know about the older adults? from the data that you've received? You mentioned event requests. What do we know about that? What do we know about what is being requested?
Well, I mean, basically, I mean, they will request services that cater to their needs, and so we make sure that we respond to that as best we can. Now,
Okay, so what I'm asking for, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm asking for specificity. You're speaking in very vague terms. They are asking for services. We know that's the case. So can you tell us, over this last year, we have 30% requesting this level of service. We have 20% requesting this service. These are the languages that seem to be predominant. Can you give us a description of what Moya is finding, given the data that you're collecting, knowing the limitations? So I'm just asking for more specificity.
If I may just respond to that question as well. One of the key points in implementing this new event request link is that based on the request like SCREE, we know SCREE is an elder adult program. So if the person is asking for information on SCREE, we can pretty much determine that that is a major item that we're going to have to now shift and focus and prioritize housing. Another important element of what we do and with this event form is that prior to us going into the community, it allows the community to provide us a list of needed areas that they would like to connect with City Hall. So for example, if public safety is a situation, we will contact our colleagues in NYPD, and we're also counting on those CBOs to tell us, hey, the flavor of the day, what we would like you to do is please bring more resources on public safety. I know that when we were in your district, Chairwoman, we were in a situation where there was a fire. So because we're also the crisis boots on the ground, we're able to go out there and be able to work with not just the requests that are being made, but also in real-time crisis situation. That's the whole nature of having this outreach team that is very much in real time responding to those needs. So something like SCREE, requesting information on like New York City Cares for 65 plus, being able to ask for information on how to get citizenship for like 51 and over. Those are the kind of questions that we take very careful note of in preparing. We take very, very careful time to prepare for these kind of outreach events as they're coming in. And then at the same time, we're also taking part in different task force. So for example, through our sister agencies, we have the New York City Aging, but also we work with New York City Cares, H&H, Metro Plus, just so that we can assess and be able to be in these facilities, doing regular stops for like IDNYC application. When we're out there helping in the health and hospitals, we know this is where the immigrant community comes to get their care. So we specifically go to these H&H facilities to make sure that we will identify a program like IDNYC, and in that process, people will approach us, ask us additional questions. And another key element is our relationship with the faith-based communities. That is so crucial when working with the immigrant population because it's a safe place. So we will reach out to like H&H, we will reach out to faith-based and even receive a lot of requests from the faith-based leaders because they're the ones that are able to really flag and amplify that voice so that we can tailor their requests and tailor our resources in a way that is culturally, linguistically appropriate.
Okay, perhaps I would like to request that Moya send us a very crisp response to what they are finding the major issues are across the city as it pertains to older immigrant adults. Obviously, You note the agency is responding in a crisis way, and also you're doing proactive work as well. So I would love to see a concise response around what are the emergent issues for older immigrant adults that you are seeing across the city, and how you are responding to that in terms of time. You said a lot, but I still have no sense, to be frank, what exactly is emerging for older immigrant adults in this community. So I'd actually like to move on and just request the agency actually provide that response with numbers, because it's like responding to everything and nothing at the same time, right? I really want to understand, are we seeing, is it language access? Is it other things? Is it healthcare? You should have a real clear sense of where the urgencies are in community.
Okay.
So I think I'd like to continue the questioning, because we've also been joined by Councilmember Salam and Councilmember Zhuang and Councilmember Lee. So in terms of, can you describe the ways in which Moya identifies and assists older immigrant New Yorkers on legal issues, U visa certifications, T visa declarations, and applications for citizenship? How has this work changed, if at all, over the past several years? And please be as specific as possible.
Okay, so I mean, it's twofold. First and foremost, it's based on the needs. I mean, when they call, they reach out to us and they express their specific concern, that's how we're able to identify, whether it's issues related to legal services, whether it's housing related services, whether it's, getting any type of guidance as it relates to their public safety concerns. So that's one approach. The other approach, obviously, is through our outreach, going out into the community, engaging with the community, and trying to get a sense of what the community is experiencing. Again, now moving forward and working more collaboratively, even with NYC Care, we'll be able to really tap into that older immigrant population, because now there's an opportunity for them to also get services through that process. And then, moving forward, we're looking forward to support them as they call us in the hotline. That's something that is constant on a daily basis, and we do track that information. The challenge, again, and I have to reiterate this, is that when we're trying to narrow it down, which is the crux of your question, in terms of identifying older adults, it's contingent upon them being willing to share their date of birth. And that information is very limited. But, we'll do the best that we can to try to segment the data, to narrow it down, not only by date of birth, not date of birth, year of birth, but also the services that are being requested, because that can help us assess. If it's a screen inquiry, if it's a public safety inquiry, it helps us narrow down, okay, what's the population that's asking for this information.
And also, if I may add, one of the changes that we are doing in terms of revamping is we recently changed our one-pager just to make it simpler with pictures. We understand that when we're providing the access to information, one of the biggest challenges that we have and that we've experienced in the field is that older immigrants have a higher rate of limited English proficiency. And because of that, we have to make even the material, and I can even share with you, I brought some of our one-page flyers that will, if they can't speak the language, they can point to the picture. And then we have those flyers in over 50 languages, including indigenous, for those of lesser used languages. So that's another key area that allows us to connect to hard to reach areas. We also have the Action NYC, which is our legal services that we subcontract to local communities because we understand that people feel more comfortable going to or being able to walk to it or be closer to where it is that we can provide assistance with legal orientation and assessment. Because let's face it, a lot of the times when you spoke about crimes is fraud. Fraud is a major crime that affects the elder communities. So we want to make sure that when we are delivering these services, we have to really keep in mind the challenges that come with being of limited English proficiency. And that's why our material is set up in a certain way. Our outreach is been revamped, all to make sure that we can prioritize the needs of all New Yorkers, especially those in their golden years.
And I have one data point for you. Almost 10% of people screened for eligibility for immigration and relief through Action NYC in calendar year 23 are ages 65 and older. That amounts to 1,335 individuals out of 14,087.
And that's through your CBOs that are providing
Correct.
services?
Yeah, because we have 18 contracts.
Yeah, I mean, that was gonna be the next question. So Moya's doing the individual outreach, right, in community services, and I'd love to know how many people are actually calling into your hotline, like what is that volume actually looking like, and then like to understand a more nuanced picture of the breakdown of those calls.
Yeah.
But what I'm not hearing you also talk about, and we're starting to allude to, is what analysis and assessment you're doing from your providers to understand how to better focus, right, and nuance the program so we're meeting the needs. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you assess the work of the providers to inform how Moya is going to shift, its programming to be more responsive? Talk to me a little bit about what that specifically looks like and the cadence with which you do that analysis.
So first, I know you mentioned in terms of, how many inquiries are we getting through the Ask Moya hotline. In broad terms, as it relates to the hotline, we had over 4,000 inquiries, and that's just calls alone. In terms of email inquiries, we had over 1,183 email inquiries. So that's the breadth of it, and it's broken down by month, and we can provide that at a later date. So that
Great, and the issues, like what are these 4,000? What are they telling us?
yeah,
These
I mean,
4,000 calls.
and we have the data to support that, to indicate exactly what the request is, what the service is, and what referrals came out of that. So we can definitely produce that at a later date.
Great.
And also in terms of languages, because we're in the field, we don't have to wait until all these studies are done. We know firsthand in real time what are some of the specific needs for additional language appropriate services. So for example, we've seen, of course, there's a need for Spanish material and resources, but also we have our Haitian Creole, our Chinese dialect, which is Mandarin, Cantonese, and Fujianese, our Bangladeshi, but also with the African community, Wolof, Fulani, French has been added. So we've hired teams that are from the communities that speak the language and are in the best position to also have their pulse at all times in the community.
Councilmember Hudson?
Yes, I did have a couple of follow-up questions. One is, how many staff do you have answering those calls? You said 4,000 calls? 4,000 calls in what span of time?
That's during calendar year 23.
Okay, so last year. So how many staff do you have answering those phone calls, and what's the rate of resolution for those calls? Is everybody getting a response to both the calls and the emails?
Yeah, I mean, we have on average 4 staffers that are answering the hotline on a daily basis, And of course, I can't give you the rate right now, but we can circle back and provide you that in terms of resolution.
Okay,
But
and
they
so-
do open and close out those types of inquiries.
And so 4 staffers that are solely answering the hotline?
Yes.
For the hotline, but also the boots on the ground, that's the outreach. So external affairs is comprised of our constituency hotline, which also includes all the 311 calls. So even if they can't remember the hotline number,
311.
they call 311, and 311 sends them to us. So we're really excited to know that we're able to follow up on these cases and know that not only is the constituency service a resource for those that may not feel comfortable meeting with someone that they can call.
And the 4,000 number includes those 311 rerouted calls?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the hotline and the 311. And also the outreach team, that's a separate component. We call those the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are out there every day doing IDNYC, going to all the different H&H, receiving all these requests for cultural events, because that's when people feel comfortable. When they invite you to their cultural events, you're building trust, you're building a sense of comfort. And again, we have to meet people where they are, and we have to meet communities where they are. And we have right now 6 members. We also rely on volunteers. We have a volunteer program. We encourage our intergeneration by having and working with the interns program. And this is part of how we're able to help expand, but also help bridge that intergenerational gap as well.
Thank you. And then how large is that outreach team, the boots on the ground, if you will?
Our boots on the ground is, I include, now if you include myself and the Assistant Commissioner Salgado, which we're out there and everybody sees us, so it's 6 staff members that are out there every day, just bringing back real-time information and being able to resolve matters in real time. It's 6, 8 in total, because I love being part of the boots on the ground. I'm not one to be sitting behind a desk, as many of you have seen me out there. And of course, my case management background. So that helps tremendously. And just about everyone who does outreach has a background, a very strong background in case management. So we're in the best position to respond and connect to the appropriate and agencies as we're looking to follow up and address a lot of the cases.
So in terms of poverty rates are higher among older immigrant adults compared to their US-born counterparts, as we said earlier. How is Moya able and working to address this specific data point?
One of the pillars of the Adams administration is to provide services regardless of age, status, or language spoken. Our team is focused on referring and connecting immigrants, including our older immigrants, to the appropriate services and resources. Part of this is sharing the appropriate information based on their needs. So in essence, when we engage with any immigrant that needs any type of service like this, and specifically older adults, we make sure that we connect them to the appropriate sister agency based on their concern.
So their concern is profound poverty. What are we doing?
So if I may also speak to that question, it's we can't do this alone. We have to do this in partnership with our elected leaders. We do this in partnership and working with our city, state, and federal agency. For example, a lot of the elder adults don't take advantage of the free tax preparation. So right now during tax season, we're connecting with the IRS for free tax preparation programs and promoting that. That's another way in which we can make sure that there's no money left on the table that can be going to this very unique population. when we're working with Social Security, and we're participating in monthly updated calls so that we can track what's going on in the different boroughs and share with them, hey, we need you to please come out there and help us get whatever information is needed directly from the source. And in this case, we have a great relationship with, I say, Everett Lowe. We have in Social Security, we have a great relationship with Brenda Luke, our taxpayer advocate within the IRS. We know each other by first names. We can call them, and they're out there hosting forums and collaborating with us to make sure that we're also initiating certain events based on whatever needs we've identified. It's very needed that as we continue to work also with our city and state partners, that because immigration is a federal matter, that we maintain a very good relationship with our partners there to make sure that we're able to meet the community where it's at.
So one of my greatest heartbreaks as a local elected official is the desperately unfortunate response our city has to older adults regarding housing and having seniors come constantly to our office who are at the point of displacement, renting a room because they can no longer afford living in the community that they built. And we have no good responses for them. Can you talk to me a little bit about how Moya advocates with other city agencies, particularly HPD, the Mayor's Public Engagement Unit, around housing vouchers? And that's another thing. Seniors are getting the vouchers, and there's so much rampant income discrimination, particularly for seniors who are getting pushed out with very little support. So can you just describe what this advocacy looks like, what are we committed to, and if there's ancillary investment in making sure that this community is getting addressed?
Okay. So again, I mean, the universe of folks that we're working with is immigrant New Yorkers in general, and that includes older adults. Segmenting is the biggest challenge. That being said, we still work with them regardless of their age to ensure that they're going to get the services that they need. Now, in terms of partnering or collaborating with different agencies, city agencies, specifically DSS, H&H, HPD, anytime we have any kind of inquiry that comes in, a lot of times our constituency unit gets that call, gets that email, and I'm plugged in immediately to collaborate with those respective city agencies to address the concerns that these immigrant New Yorkers are dealing with, regardless of age. So I just wanted to, just level set there, because it's very hard to, narrow it down to older immigrants. We service all immigrants, all.
I understand that. I understand that. I have to respond to this because it's driving me a little crazy. This hearing is around older immigrants, and I understand that you have a challenge with your data. I understand that, but I need you to focus your responses on what your agency is learning and focusing on. In this larger context, you're serving all immigrants. I understand that. This hearing is on older immigrants. So if you can tell me 20% from what you know, with the best data you have at your disposal, this is what we're facing and this is what we're responding, is what we are trying to get at here in this hearing. So you don't need to keep doing the disclaimer. Okay. We understand that. Give us the response to the best of your ability on what Moya is seeing and responding. You're the one on the ground, right, working with the Department of Aging and all the other agencies. So in particular to housing, can you talk to me about what your advocacy looks like for older immigrant adults regarding vouchers and housing conditions?
If I may also defer to our colleagues in the New York City Aging, because a lot of the work that we do and our responsibility is to also work hand in hand. So whenever we do have an older adult, we want to make sure that we are referring to our sister agency that specifically works with the individual on these kind of matters. So if I may just, at this moment, defer to my colleagues at the New York City Aging.
Sure. So housing is a top Aging Connect call category, and we make those connections to HRA, HPD, and other sister agencies with regard to housing vouchers and things of that nature. So we obviously work very closely with our sister agencies as they're the experts in housing. In addition, our legal services providers do provide housing services. So we do refer to we do connect our clients to our legal services providers for tenant issues, foreclosure, home repair fraud, utility shutoffs, energy issues, home ownership issues, real property, home equity, conversion, homelessness issues, things of that nature. Those are issues that our legal services providers do handle. And in addition to that, HRA and HPD are part of our cabinet for older New Yorkers as well.
Are you seeing particular trends for older adults in this area? Obviously, you're responding to quite a range of concerns and issues across the city. I'm sure they look very different depending on the borough, but are you seeing trends around, concentration of issues, particularly as it relates to older adults in the housing arena?
You mean with regard to the legal services providers?
With regards to housing, and in particular, I guess I'd love to learn a little bit more about the work related to vouchers and what that specifically looks like. But
because we refer those particular issues to HRA, we don't
Sure.
keep track.
Okay. I guess with that, I'd be happy to turn it over to council colleagues.
Okay, and then we'll
then
come
we'll
back
come
to you.
back,
Yeah, thank you. So we'll start with Councilmember Brewer, followed by Councilmember Lee.
Thank you very much. Picking up on the housing issue, I'm always focused on housing court. So do you keep track either through housing court answers or any other means as to older adults who are immigrants who are facing eviction or other kinds of huge challenges in housing court? And if you don't, who does?
So we ask our legal services providers, obviously, to keep track of cases, but we only keep track of cases insofar as outcomes, in terms of cases opened and cases closed. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, there's many confidentiality issues, so there aren't that many details that we can ask for.
Okay, but that would be, it seems to me that would be something without getting into challenges that involve personnel, something to look at. When you say your legal services providers, I assume those are contracted out, legal aid, et cetera, not city employees, correct? All right, I would suggest that that needs to be, in today's world, something looked at much more carefully, housing court evictions. Number two, do we know, I know you talked about a lot of statistics, and I listened before I got here. I was teaching this morning at Hunter, so I couldn't get here earlier. Social Security and pension are very hard to come by if you've been a vendor your whole life and you don't have any papers. So do we have any numbers on those individuals who are maybe surviving with family or getting rent paid by family, et cetera, but don't have any documentation? Do we have any numbers on those individuals who are older adults in New York?
I don't believe we would have that kind of detail, and also, unless the client is working with us, we wouldn't necessarily have the global information on that, older New Yorkers, if they've never touched any of our programs.
So you don't have that information?
We'd have to defer to our federal partners for those.
To your which partners?
To our federal partners for
your
those.
Federal partners.
Those are
Why
federal,
would they know?
Because those are federal programs.
Okay, but, well, these folks have no Social Security and no pensions. I don't know what programs they might be in.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you were asking specifically about federal programs.
No. I'm saying there are many, I have many friends who have parents who are former vendors, for instance, right? On the street, and they have no pension and no Social Security. They just don't. So, family sometimes takes care of them, but they're struggling, right? You don't have those statistics, okay? Other question is budget cuts to this population. The mayor has a lot of budget cuts. I don't support his budget cuts. But do you know, can you be specific as to how this community, older adults who are immigrants, not speaking language will be impacted by your budget cuts, which I know you don't like. OMB imposes them, and I don't like them either. But do you have any indication on how this population will be impacted?
So in general budget cuts, our priority is always the needs of the older adults, whether they're immigrants or any older adults, right? And so we are always thinking about service continuity and how we've looked at how we can achieve those goals without cutting services. So far we've been successful in that. And
So you're
that's
not cutting any services at all despite the budget cuts?
We aren't here to speak about the budget, and sadly, you have a social worker and a lawyer here. We don't
Okay.
know numbers, so.
Okay. But so you don't know right at
That's
this
good
moment.
lawyer speak.
That's why we brought it.
So at this moment, you don't know how these budget cuts will impact. We will obviously maybe ask that during the budget hearings. Is that what you're telling us?
Next week.
Okay. Do you apply for grants, federal, state, private, at all for this population, older adults who are immigrants?
Yes, I mean, generally we're always looking for more.
Did you get any grants for this population? I used to write them for Mayor Dinkins. I know grants very well.
I cannot think of specifically for this population, but if there's something available, we are definitely always interested in applying for those.
So you don't know if anything's ever been available for this population, grant-wise?
I personally do not know that right now, but we can get back to you.
And in terms of food, culturally appropriate, how many of your centers, other than Lenox Hill, do scratch food from scratch, that's what scratch food is called, that would be appropriate for this community?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how many do from scratch. I know that there's a handful.
It's zero except for Lenox Hill.
I believe there might be others. Lenox Hill,
Very
obviously an
few.
exception. They do wonderful. They do a wonderful job. And Lenox Hill actually does training for that's open to all of our programs, which is really wonderful. We've partnered with them on that for them to teach other programs how to do similar type of scratch cooking. And we're always looking into opportunities to also and working with Mayor's Office of Food Policy to enhance the food.
So that you
service
could have more
division.
culturally appropriate food. If it's scratch, it would be more culturally appropriate. All right.
Yes.
Finally, long-term care is a mess. So many immigrant communities don't necessarily take advantage of long-term care. I understand that, it's expensive. I deal with it all the time with my constituents. It's nothing but a nightmare. Do you have any sense of how many older adults who are immigrants are in long-term care? What kind of challenges do they have to deal with?
I don't believe we have that kind of specific data. Of course, we can help any clients that either come to an older adult center or are part of case management to enroll in long-term care, but we don't necessarily know how many immigrants have those services.
All right, thank you. I think you need some more data, if I may say that. Thank you.
Well, all of that data is voluntarily reported, so that's a reason why.
I'm the author of the open data bill, right? You could do more data collection on some of these issues. Really, I mean, you do need to. You cannot do policy without data, right?
Absolutely.
And with all due respect, I know you're strapped for staff, I got it all. Work with Jonathan Bowles, he can get data, right? Figure out how to get more data on some of these issues that have also been asked by my colleagues. You're really shy on data, if I may suggest that. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilmember Brewer. And I would say I would say across the board, citywide. So it's not unique to you all, but we definitely need more data for everyone on everything. I want to move on to Councilmember Lee, followed by Councilmember Joseph.
Good morning, everyone, and shout out to all the social workers in the room. I have two parts of questions. One is about the case management contracts, and the other one is about the geriatric mental health services. So in terms of the case management contracts, because I know that in my recent memory, at least, when Bloomberg was mayor, they consolidated a lot of the case management contracts, and so a lot of the smaller immigrant serving senior centers are not eligible because you need to have a certain number of cases open at any one given time. So a lot of the larger providers are the ones that end up doing case management, which ends up meaning that in terms of the homebound meal delivery providers, those are usually subcontracted. So just out of curiosity, how many or what percentage of the groups that you have providing culturally sensitive meals are subcontractors versus the main contractors? And also, have you looked at possibly revamping the RFP process to be more inclusive? Because what ends up happening time and time again is that as subcontractors, they get less portion of the funding, but they're still scratch-made meals that are very culturally appropriate. What ends up happening also, just from knowing on the ground, is that they end up doing the same work that the case management agencies do because of the language capacity naturally, right? So even though I, as a Korean serving provider, am not allowed to technically do a lot of that work, right, legally, we end up doing it anyway because who else is going to do that because of the language needs? And so I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So we just actually have new case management providers actually starting in July. That RFP just concluded, and we're actually in the process right now. We have an RFP for home delivered meals out on the street, and so we'll also tentatively have new providers for that. One of the biggest changes to our home delivered meals RFP is actually to eliminate too many subs, because we do recognize that is at a that oftentimes hurts, like you said, the small providers who do the ethnic meals. We are very proud that we require all of our home delivered meals programs to serve the different communities and to be competent in that. And our nutritionists work with them to make those menus, to make sure that they have those options available depending on the threshold of the community. And we are encouraging commissary kitchens, so we actually funded 4 centers or 4 programs to do to help cook for the rest of the network, and one of those providers is actually one of our ethnic providers who does halal meals, so that's available more widely to the network.
Are those more for-profit or nonprofit?
No, that's a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yes. And then we're encouraging all of our programs to cook on site. We also have a list of all of our older adult centers who are able to provide meals for HDM programs as an option, to also support, to do more in-house cooking to help the nonprofits that we work with already to continue to expand and serve within the community.
So having less subcontractors, does that mean that you increase the total number of meal contractor providers for home delivered meals?
Not necessarily. Basically, we're trying to eliminate more subs of subs. So in places where we can encourage the providers to cook themselves and support them in doing updates to their kitchens or whatever the needs are, we're looking into ways to fund those things. Obviously, it's always, money's always a challenge, but where we can, we are encouraging them to use the kitchens they have. But when they're using a sub, the encouragement is to either use our commissary kitchens, which are other nonprofits, or an older adult center, because it is challenging for one program often to cook, say, 4 different types of cuisines, especially if they only have one kitchen. But that's something that is a goal of ours, and the sub of a sub is more. That's where really we see the biggest issue with basically the funds get diluted the more people it goes through. So that's why we've made a conscious effort to help try to eliminate that, unless there's a case where they can make a good case for why they need to use that type of model.
Okay. And I'm so sorry, I just have another part question about the mental health meals. But, mental health services, not meals, sorry. I need food for my soul, actually. But in terms of, I know you guys have 88 partners, all of which I believe are Article 31 clinics, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't oversee the program, but I think so.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, going along with the data, have you looked at the data? Because I know for certain, workforce issues in general across the board with healthcare services are very short-staffed. And on top of that, to find social workers that speak a lot of these different languages is also very challenging. So I just wanted to know if you are tracking the English-speaking folks that are utilizing the mental health services versus the non-English-speaking seniors, and looking at what that rate is, because I know that, at least for the AAPI community, we have the highest rates of underutilization of mental health services, which even grows higher when you're looking at the senior older adult population. So my question is, what efforts are being made to increase that participation if it is low? And then also my second part of the question is there room in the geriatric mental health RFP to include groups, and I'm just thinking out loud, like SACS? SACS does not have an Article 31 clinic. It's run by Sudha Acharya, serving the South Asian community in Flushing area. So is there room to include services like that, because they do the peer-to-peer, they do other services in the community where they actually reach a lot of the older adults? It's not formal mental health services, but they do offer different types of mental health and social programs like that. So the second part is to see if there's room, or is there talks about including those types of services into the geriatric mental health RFP?
Sure. I think we need to get back to you about including those types of services. I think that's very interesting and definitely something to consider. And even if it's not through geriatric mental health, our centers can work with different providers and different, so I think there's definitely opportunities to look into that. And I speak from personal experience from having worked at the centers before coming here, and I had a geriatric mental health program. They do a wonderful job with outreach. That's a core component of those programs. Before they even start doing mental health counseling, they become, the idea is for them to become a part of the program. So they'll serve meals, they will participate in parties. They really try to incorporate themselves, so it's not, there's to help lessen that stigma of, oh, that's therapy and that makes me crazy, or those things that we know obviously are not true, but that really a lot of cultures really don't feel comfortable to sometimes speak to a social worker or a counselor of some sort. So that's a huge component of that program, and that I think helps a lot. We also see that when the center staff really buy into the service and understand the benefits of it, they can also help make those referrals and help kind of bridge that gap to help more people utilize, because it really is such an amazing program.
And then if you can get back to us about the data in terms of the utilization rates, because I think that would actually be a huge indicator of what's actually happening on the ground, because I guarantee you, even if some seniors are not utilizing the services, it's not because they don't have the issues in the community. Yeah.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Joseph.
Thank you, Chairs. Good morning, everyone. I have a few questions around what specific challenges do immigrant older adults face in accessing healthcare, social services, and other resources in New York other than language barrier? What is the other barriers, and how do you remove those barriers so our seniors, like Councilmember Lee said, not that they don't need the service, but they just don't know how to get it? And how we plan on removing some of these barriers?
I think that's an interesting question. I think a lot of the issue is just not even knowing what exists out there. And so that's, I think, a big part of the Cabinet for Older New Yorkers is how do we break down those silos between the agencies and get the information out to the programs. A lot of what our centers and our NORCs do is education. And so they bring in presentations on different topics, and that the idea is that they identify what is missing kind of in that community, because it differs, right? Every community has different needs or has less knowledge of certain topics, and so we really rely on them to identify what those needs are of the older adults and bring that information. Almost all of our programs also offer case assistance, or the NORCs do case management as well, so that's another opportunity to help anybody with getting benefits or finding out more information, whatever those needs are.
And just to follow up,
Go ahead.
I think there's also the issues that older adults face are the same issues that immigrant older adults face. So what our agency focuses on also just making sure that older adults of all backgrounds are aware of our services. So we make sure that our services are noticed to all backgrounds and all communities. So for example, we have a Join Us campaign that we put out in 2022. That campaign was a multimedia campaign that was created in print and digital format, radio and television, and those ads were published in English, Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Russian to make sure that we reached communities of all backgrounds. And
Are you using ethnic media to get your messaging across?
we are.
I didn't hear Haitian Creole in there. I still have seniors in my district. I represent a large Haitian community where they still didn't know about SCREE. We had to personally pick up the phone call to let them know. Yeah. SCREE.
SCREE is unfortunately not our program. That's a department.
No, I'm just giving you an example, and it was through our office that we had to pick up the phone and call the individuals that did not play this. So this is where the CBOs would come in, play, and language access is very important to our seniors, and cultural.
Absolutely.
Are we doing cultural? Most communities, sometimes they don't even want to tell you your birthday, but they have to feel comfortable if you have the cultural norms for them to feel comfortable enough to open up to you. In terms of also deportation. Our communities, undocumented immigrant, older New Yorkers are not going to come to you and tell you information about them because they don't trust you. One, you're a government agency. Two, how do they know you're not working with ICE? So we face those things in a lot of our communities, older adults, immigrant communities, they go underground. When these things happen, especially during the pandemic, all of our older adults that were undocumented, they went underground. So they had to have a trusted face for them, and using faith-based is a great way to get the message across because they believe in their pastors. I say something, it has a different meaning, but if the pastor says you're going to do this, this is what they're going to do. So I think also you should use CBOs to come in and play an important partnership because there's the trust there. So the trust has to be built with our immigrants, especially our undocumented older adults. Can I ask one more question?
Yes, one more, and then I do want to make sure, because we're on a time crunch for the room.
Yes, we are.
So I just want to make sure we
how
get
do
to other.
we help older adults, immigrants, especially with disabilities, as Councilmember Brewer brought up, and those with chronic illnesses? And I'm going to stop here.
Sorry, your question was just in general, how do we help older adults with chronic disabilities?
Older adults, especially our immigrant, today's the hearing is about immigrant older adults. How do we support them with disabilities, chronic illnesses?
So with any client, we meet them where they're at, right? And every immigrant, every older adult has different needs. They're part of a group, but that doesn't mean that they have the same things. All of our centers are ADA compliant. We have trained our staff in cultural competency so that they can be sensitive to the needs. So it really just, it depends on each case, but we are very confident in our partners and our staff that when they when there is a need, that they make the appropriate referral or assist them with whatever the issue is.
Thank you, chairs.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. Councilmembers Krishnan and Zhuang.
Thank you so much, Chairs Hudson and Aviles. Thank you all for joining today, too, and for your testimony. Look, I think that, and as you're hearing from my colleagues, too, this is a very, very urgent issue and a serious one in need of addressing. And it doesn't necessarily just fall on you all, but goes back prior administrations as well on a number of points. I just have one question, but just two quick things to reiterate. One is Councilmember Brewer's point about housing court. Having spent many years there, I know how many seniors are facing eviction, are evicted simply because they don't have access to language accessible legal services. And the right to counsel is not being implemented in the way that it should be to ensure they have access to counsel, especially if they're required to go to court first to get a lawyer. I've represented seniors in these situations. It's one way to ensure they're not going to get legal services is to make it so difficult for them to access. But the question I had is specifically about language access and culturally appropriate services. That's a vital issue that is not being addressed by the agencies in terms of language access in particular and resources for seniors. That also translates to getting better data, and Chair Aviles asked some questions about it. And I'd like to know, when it comes to the Asian American communities in particular, we're not monolithic communities. There has not been a real effort by city government to disaggregate data when it comes to our communities. And where that plays out in this context is across Asian American communities, we all have different dietary restrictions, whether it's vegetarianism, whether it's halal food, or certain types of food. But the bottom line is making sure it's culturally appropriate and accessible and healthy for seniors in particular who are eating it. What effort is being made to disaggregate data for AAPI communities and understand the different dietary needs and make sure that each of the different Asian American communities gets access to the culturally appropriate food that they need?
So regarding the data, I think that's a wonderful point and something that we can take back and discuss more. Regarding the dietary needs and that we, at least our New York City aging providers provide. So we always, client input is so important to all of our programs, and that's something we require that both our older adult centers, our NORCs, and our home delivered meals programs do. So basically, I mean, with home delivered meals, they have options between menus, and vegetarian is actually something that we require all of our providers to do at least once a week. Sorry, not vegetarian, plant-based, there's a difference. But we, at all the older adult centers, they have at least annually input, or I'm sorry, for menu planning twice a year, because we do menus twice a year, that is required, something that's part of our standards. But also, I mentioned earlier, they have advisory councils, and so that is made up of older adults of that program. So their role is really to take information from the larger group and bring it back to the staff so that they can make sure that the menus are meeting the needs of older adults. adults, whether that's more vegetarian meals or it's, changing the menu to be more culturally competent, maybe less salt, or not salt, that's a bad example, but, but our meals are very healthy. They follow all of the dietary guidelines of the city, the state. There's a lot of restrictions on what they can serve to ensure that it is a healthy meal that we're serving at all of our programs.
I just conclude by just saying, it's important to, because of the lack of disaggregated data for API communities, even if the intent is there and the programs are there, you're not necessarily going to be reaching the individuals themselves who have specific dietary preferences. So really giving thought to how, with the lack of that data, you all are able to make sure that the programs up here translate into the proper, culturally appropriate food on the ground.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, chairs.
Thank you. Councilmember Zwang?
Morning, everyone. I do have a very simple question because my coworker already asked everything. In my district, like recently we had the old building, the elevator broke down. We have a lot of Russian speaking in the building and Holocaust survivor. There are some of them over 100 years old. This type of situation, is New York City Aging able to help? And what kind of service you can provide in this type of situation?
So whenever there's, I think it depends on the case. With the elevator, if it's part of our...
And they cannot get anywhere. I have to personally bring the food to that building to give to them. Do you guys have hot meal service for this kind of emergency situation?
So we could always look into if those clients are eligible for home-delivered meals. So that's one option, absolutely, and one way to get the meals. What some of our providers did during the pandemic, for example, which is not the same, but where clients, didn't feel comfortable or couldn't leave their homes, some of our providers would do deliveries in the buildings. They would. It really depends on the availability of their staff in the center that's located there, but that's something we can always look into because meals is such a huge part of what we do, and of course we never want an older adult to go without a meal due to an issue like that. So we can,
because they called our office, they don't know where to get anything, and our office have to get to the people, get to the meal and go deliver to their house for a week before they get any help. And also, in our community, my community is a lot of, probably 70% immigrants. We have people need halal food, kosher food, Chinese, anything you can imagine, we need everything. Do you guys have a data or any information can provide each council member's office when we have needs, we can reach out to you? And also the data, how many hot meal you serve in different, how many kosher meal you serve, how many halal food you serve. Do you have those data can share with us?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we can share that with you.
And also where the seniors can go to get those
Of course,
meals.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm going to turn it over to Chair Aviles for a few more questions, and then I'll ask a few, and then we'll get to the public testimony. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. In terms of NYC Care, can Moya tell us a little bit more about what role you play in outreach related to New York City Care?
Okay, thank you. I'm still a dinosaur. So the role that Moya plays is not a new role. We've always collaborated. Our boots on the ground, which is what I call our outreach teams, that's how we distinguish them, is worked with New York City Care at all of the different events that we go to. We bring their material with us. That's what makes our team so unique. So it's not a new relationship. So whether or not the program management has shifted to H&H, we will continue to lend strong support to our sister agency to help ensure that the program is a huge success as we perform and continue to do outreach across the city to the 65+ Medicaid, Medicare, newly enrolled, as we hope to make sure that we're also counting on your support in terms of going out there with our outreach efforts, our events, and making sure that those resources are made available. So again, this is not a new relationship.
Okay.
We just want to continue to lend that strong support as we have.
Okay, great. So in terms of the roundtables that you mentioned earlier, was New York City Care included in these roundtable discussions?
Yes. In fact, Moya, working with the different agencies just recently, I would say a couple of weeks ago, did have a roundtable with H&H and the executive director of New York City Care, which is Dr. Jonathan Jimenez. He gave an overview of New York City Care and shared his latest updates on the program.
And what are the groups that are involved in the monthly roundtable?
You have Afrobeats, Bangladesh, El Diario, Sinstao Daily, the China Press, Univision, and others, to name a few.
Great, thank you. In this, excuse me one second. Okay, so for the New York City Care efforts I'm sorry, I'm just not reading this properly. This year, H&H shared that the New York City Care will support efforts to inform New Yorkers of these new state health insurance options for undocumented immigrants over 65. So will Moya also be involved in this outreach? And what will be New York City Aging's role in the outreach as well?
Yes, Moya will be involved in the outreach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us to what extent the outreach will look like for this effort as well?
In fact, I have in my bag some New York City Care material. We just carry it in our trunks, in our bags, everywhere we go. We understand how critical it is for us to be able to make healthcare accessible and how much we need to be doing, and it's never going to be enough. This is why, like I said, we make sure that with every single one of our outreach, that is part of like our one-pager. We give out the New York City Care information, and we have it in different languages. So they can also ask questions to our teams who they feel comfortable with, because our teams are in the community speaking their languages. Many of them grew up there. So this is a relationship that we've enjoyed and we will continue to work with.
Right.
And also, I mean, NYC Care, they collaborate with us. They attend a lot of these events and vice versa, and we support their events. So that's the way that engagement looks like.
Do you help people enroll, or you're just providing the pamphlet and the information?
Just provide the information and resources, and NYC Care takes it from there.
And do you maintain data on those outreach efforts, how many people you've been able to reach in each event? Do you keep that kind of data?
We'll circle back on that.
Okay.
We'll circle back.
Okay, thank you. Last question. In terms of newly arrived asylum seekers who are enrolled in emergency Medicaid and eligible for this new health insurance that will be automatically transitioned into the new insurance, but New York State Health will send them a letter detailing the new insurance with instructions to choose a Medicaid managed plan by the deadline provided. So for older immigrants in shelters who are subject to the 30-day directive, will Moya provide any outreach to ensure that these older asylum seekers are aware of the changes or connected to the right agencies to ensure that they receive their documents?
We're working closely with the New York City Office of Asylum Seeker Operations, or OASOS, on an array of topics related to asylum seekers. We defer this question to them because they're the ones at the forefront, but we play a supportive role in that process.
So they're going to tell you how to connect to the people that are moving around?
Well, I mean, they're dealing with 30-day initiatives and stuff like that. We don't manage that. We support in terms of providing information as needed, and that's the role that we play.
So just for clarity, so OASO will tell you these folks have moved from this facility to this facility, go get them, Moya, inform them. That's the
Yeah, there's-
directive OWASU will provide to Moya in order to provide the continuity of information.
Yeah, this collaboration that they, or communication that they provide, and in conjunction with H&H and DSS, so it's different folks involved in this. It's not just one entity.
No. We are well aware of the maze of agencies involved, and quite frankly, it's leaves my head spinning, but thank you.
And just as a quick follow-up, what, if anything, does NYC Aging do around NYC Cares?
Well, as we always do, we work to pass along any pertinent information. We know, obviously, that healthcare is paramount to all of our older adults. So we pass along information to our programs and our providers, and we partner with our sister agencies, of course, to develop outreach plans and target high-need communities. We, of course, are participating in Moya's roundtables, and Moya, again, is part of our cabinet for older New Yorkers, and of course, we look forward to supporting these agencies and whenever we can to outreach to older adults.
Do you require contracted providers to have that information available?
Not currently, but of course, anytime we can, and of course with Aging Connect, whenever an older adult calls and requests any information, Aging Connect has that information and can pass that along.
Okay, and okay, no, go for it. I'm gonna pass it over to Councilmember Aviles.
Okay, sorry, thank you. It's a team effort here. Thank you for your patience. Can you tell us a little bit about how Moya and DFTA are reaching homebound older immigrant adults? And if you could just describe what the services are like that are available.
Sure. So for our homebound older adults, that's our case management agencies work very closely with them. So they're assigned a case manager, and any services that we provide at an older adult center essentially could be provided through that case manager. Information, of course, applications for benefits and entitlements. It's actually more intense. Case management's a little more intensive than what we do typically in an older adult center. So they really do a full assessment on the clients, and then they will work with them whatever their needs are. And many of them are, of course, immigrants, since we know that more than half the population of older adults are foreign-born.
In terms of Access-a-Ride, can you, are undocumented older adults able to access Access-a-Ride?
So Access-a-Ride is not one of our programs. However, we do have transportation through New York City Aging, and of course that is open to all older New Yorkers.
Great, thank you.
But would you happen to know the answer to that question?
No.
About Access-a-Ride?
Yeah.
It's a state program, so I'm not sure what they're, but I had to guess they're eligible, but I don't know the details of the state programs. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last question. So how are Moya and DFTA reaching older adults who may be experiencing abuse at home? I know you talked about elder justice, but if you could just expand on that a bit more.
Sure. So in addition to elder justice, one of our requirements of our programs, both for staff and for clients, is to do training annually on elder abuse. And so there's a training that the staff are required to take annually to be familiar with the signs. Obviously, there's different types of abuse that we are aware of, and how to help somebody if they are experiencing abuse. And then also we do trainings for the older adults to also be aware, whether it's for themselves or for somebody they know.
And if you could just briefly describe for an older immigrant adult who's experiencing abuse, what kinds of actual supports are available for them?
Sure. So I think the best resource would be our elder justice program. And so they, depending on the case, they might refer to APS or other services. There's different resources, depending on the type of abuse, how severe it is, but that is available to all older New Yorkers. We have different providers throughout the city who serve different catchment areas to support any older adult.
Could you give us just 2 or 3 examples? So what I'm looking for to get on the record is for those listening in, right? They don't know what to imagine, what the various services could be. So if you could just say, like, These 5 services are available in particular, although the cases are obviously unique and can be very different.
Sure. So I think one of the big, or I can talk about the types of abuses that we see. Like there's financial abuse, of course. So they might work with the, with the banks, looking into the person's bank accounts, checking, maybe opening new accounts, closing accounts, things like that is one way. If there's neglect, usually APS would be called because we don't have legal privileges with our clients, so that in those cases we need to refer out or work with the NYPD.
Our legal services providers do also offer legal services for abuse and neglect cases, so sometimes our legal services providers do get involved in those kinds of cases as well.
Thank you. In fiscal 2024, the council allocated $29 million to community-based organizations to support older adults, of which $5.7 million is specifically targeted for immigrant older adults. The council funds 2 initiatives dedicated to supporting immigrant older adults in the city. The first initiative, the Elie Wiesel Holocaust Survivors, is funded at $4.2 million in fiscal 2024 and supports Holocaust survivors who are below the poverty line by offering a range of social services to maintain and improve their quality of life. The second initiative, Older Adult Clubs for Immigrant Populations, is funded at $1.5 million in fiscal 2024 and provides operational support to culturally competent and linguistically accessible non-NYC aging older adult clubs and programmatic support for NYC aging older adult clubs that predominantly serve immigrant older adults. Both initiatives support community-based organizations that serve older adult immigrant populations. Additionally, while the council's other older adult initiatives aren't specifically dedicated to immigrants, they also provide support to community-based organizations that serve older adults who are immigrants. How much does NYC Aging spend on campaigns aimed at immigrant older adults?
So over the last couple of years, we've added an additional $2 million to our providers' budgets specifically for marketing and outreach. And so also part of the last RFP we did is one of the requirements is that they actually do have outreach as part of their programs. And that's something that our program officers will check during assessments to see how they're doing outreach. We also, as Penny mentioned earlier, we have one example is the Join Us campaign that New York City Aging did, and we work very closely with a lot of ethnic media. We do those campaigns in print, digital, radio, television ads, and in different languages like English, Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Russian. That's just one example of the type of outreach, but the programs also do on-the-ground outreach to the populations or the communities they serve.
Thank you. And this is a little redundant, so bear with me, but how does NYC Aging ensure meals are culturally competent? Are there any metrics you can provide on how many culturally competent meals, including a borough breakdown, were distributed and the related costs?
Sure. So as I mentioned, that's one of the requirements of our programs is that they are culturally competent. Our nutritionists monitor and approve the menus, so they will work with the provider to ensure that not only do they meet the nutritional guidelines, but that they meet the requirements to be for that cultural meal that they are serving. And sorry, the second question was,
are there any metrics you can provide on how many culturally competent meals, including a borough breakdown, were distributed and the related costs?
Yes, yeah. For our home delivered meals programs, we have a lot of details on that.
So you'll send it to me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Are there any NYC Aging programs that cater specifically to immigrant older adults? And if so, what are they and what is the budget for each?
So the programs and services that are specifically geared towards older adults happen within our older adult centers or other direct services, which are contracted providers. So some examples are like Hamilton Madison House and the attached Hamilton Madison House Newark, or Naturally Occurring Retirement Community. We also have the Village View and Sunnyside Older Adult Center. Those are 2 examples where they provide wraparound services and connections to other programs with those providers. So in reality, as we've said, older adults, regardless of their immigration status, can utilize all of our services at an OAC and be referred to other programs. Our case management services can also do intakes for older adults regardless of their citizenship status and refer them to home-delivered meals as long as the individual, of course, meets those qualifications.
And do you have a budget for
they do have a budget.
It would be, I know, part of like the RFP and their operating costs, but
I think we can get back to it.
Okay. How many case management hours or clients has NYC Aging utilized relating to NYC Care and immigrant older adult health services?
So we require that our CMAs, our case management agencies, are culturally competent, that they have staff that speak the languages of the communities, and have a formal language access plan, as I mentioned earlier, so that anybody can be assisted in their primary language. So once a client has completed the phone intake session to identify the problems, the case manager then develops the best way to assist that older adult. The assessment does not necessarily include questions about their status, so, but based on the client's needs, the case management agency may ask their status to determine their eligibility in a range of programs. They are required to connect clients to resources such as New York City Care. However, we don't track New York City Care specifically, although it may be represented in the case notes.
Do you know how many older adults NYC Aging has assisted in enrolling in NYC Care thus far in fiscal 24 or even in fiscal 23? So even if they're not, if you don't necessarily know the status, but ultimately somebody's being referred to NYC Care, do you at least have numbers on that?
It would be reflected in the case notes, but we wouldn't necessarily, the way they record the data, they don't necessarily put where they refer them. It would be challenging to pull it out.
Does the administration support the pre-considered introduction that's being heard today?
I'm sorry, can you say
Do you support the legislation that's being heard today?
So we are reviewing the bill and share your goal in presenting as much information as possible to older New Yorkers. We look forward to discussing the bill further with you in the future.
Okay. Alrighty, I think that's it for us. Thank you so much. I do strongly encourage you to stay behind to listen to public testimony, although I know everyone has busy days, but we will be moving on to the public testimony, so thank you again. And I'll turn it over to committee counsel to call up the first panel. Thank you.
Thank you, chairs. Thank you so much to the representatives from the administration for your time today. We appreciate it. We will now be moving on to public testimony. Each person testifying must fill out, in the room, must fill out an appearance card to testify. So if you wish to testify in person, please ensure that you have filled out an appearance card at the desk with the Sergeant at Arms. Each person testifying will have 2 minutes to speak, and testimony should be relevant to the oversight topic, which is the needs of immigrant older adults in New York City. We're going to have 4 in-person panels, and then we will move to folks testifying virtually. And at this time, I'm going to call the first panel. I want to apologize in advance for any mispronunciations of names. I'm trying my best. First, we will have Nilbia Coyote, Noeli Reyes, Laura Rivera, and Amreen Basan. If you could please come up to the table to deliver your testimony. And we will go from your left to your right, if that sounds okay. And you can start when you are ready, and you will each have 2 minutes.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Nilbia Coyote, and I'm the Executive Director at NICE, New Immigrant Community Empowerment. Thank you to Chairwomen Hudson and Aviles for your ongoing support and advocacy on this very important topic. NICE is a community-based organization dedicated to empowering immigrant workers by organizing their individual and collective social, economic, and political power to seek justice in life and at work. Our approach combines a powerful workforce development training program, which includes certifications, training, political education on workers' rights, job search, and placement, with holistic wraparound key supportive services for immigrants and their families. We were founded 25 years ago, and we serve over 15,000 immigrant workers, new immigrants from the past, present, and future. From construction workers, day laborers, asylum seekers, restaurant workers, and cleaning and hospitality workers, we organize the workforce of the future, whether they have been New Yorkers for more than 20 years or just arriving at NICE. New York City's population of older adults currently represents 20% of our city's entire population, as we have heard for the last 2 hours. Last January, the New York Times article, "Many Older Immigrants in New York Are Struggling, I Have No Future," featured one of our members, Francisco Palacios, and the dire conditions he is currently living in, such as thousands of older immigrants in the city. The article highlighted the reality that NICE has been living for years. Older immigrants like Mr. Palacios now make up just over half of New York City's 65 and over population. A portion of NICE members like Don Francisco are aging and they do not have the resources needed to stop working. Other aging immigrants are injured because of workplace accidents or dealing with serious illnesses that prevent them from working. They are struggling with mental health issues such as depression, and many of them feel isolated. These older members, many of whom are undocumented, came to the US when they were at their prime working age, and they have helped build in New York City. For years, the older adults took advantage of these years to work hard, maintaining their families here and back home, but they were never able to fully have the economic mobility to ensure them a healthy and peaceful retirement or even access to one. Aging immigrant workers have no social safety net available or cannot afford to stop working and now find themselves physically less able to do the same range of jobs and without the savings to stop working. Their numbers have increased at more than twice the rate of US-born seniors since 2010, mainly because of the graying of immigrants who came decades ago as young adults and workers. We are asking the support of City Council to be able to implement a pilot for 50 seniors called Apprenticeship for Life and Work for older immigrant adults or seniors. That will support immigrants older than 60 years old who cannot afford to stop working, because this is the reality that we didn't mention today, or who are underemployed. To deal with their new life realities, work with them to prepare a life and work plan in this new phase for their lives. I just want to mention very quickly that we recognize that many of these older adults, particularly undocumented immigrants, cannot afford to stop working. For that reason, our culturally competent and dignifying programs for older adults will focus on transforming the professional skills that older adults have developed over the years and transferring them to new workforce alternatives or opportunities to generate an income. Jobs will not require extreme physical efforts. For this, NICE plans to develop alternatives in the seasonal work, green industry, construction, residential and commercial cleaning, and other service industries. This population also needs to build new life skills to meet the needs that they are facing at this moment of their lives. For example, introducing them to senior centers and their services. Our people do not have access to that information. They don't believe they have it, actually. For example, we also think that we should empower people knowing how they can still continue using transportation. People don't have access to reduced fare metro cars. They don't have access to healthcare information. We need to support them and guide them in the management of their health bills and providing them assistance. I appreciate your time, and thank you for this extra minute.
Thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon. Honorable members of the New York City Council, my name is Noeli Reyes, and I am honored to address this esteemed council today as a dedicated community organizer representing Mixteca organization and community members we serve. Mixteca is deeply invested in advocating for the needs of immigrants in our city. I've had the privilege of working closely with immigrant communities, particularly older adults, to ensure that they have access to essential services and support networks that are vital for their well-being and dignity. One of the most pressing issues facing immigrant older adults in New York City is access to comprehensive services, including healthcare. Many older adults in immigrant communities face significant barriers in navigating complex systems, including language barriers, lack of culturally competent care, and limited awareness of available resources. As a result, they often do not receive adequate services, resources, or support. At Mixteca, we provide support to Latinx and Indigenous communities in Sunset Park and Greater New York City. Being a well-established community-based organization in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, we have established a strong bond with the existing and new community members in the surrounding areas and across the city. This enables us to foster trust with newly arrived effectively. As the sole Spanish-speaking organization in Brooklyn that caters to asylum seekers, our team of staff and volunteers provide culturally sensitive assistance in Spanish. Currently, Mixteca is surrounded by 17 shelters serving asylum seekers. On a weekly basis, we are currently serving approximately 150 to 200 individuals. Individuals that need help and information from creating an email to applying to benefits and learning about their rights. I have some testimonies from our community members that have expressed the following regarding the support that Mixteca has brought to them. As an immigrant with little resources, it is challenging to find information that is correct. In my community, often people share news with each other that isn't correct. At Mixteca, I was able to find the help I needed to enroll in services such as Fair Fares and NYC Care. The information to these resources were in my language, and I knew I could apply to these services because information came from a trustworthy organization. Another community member said, Mixteca is my second home. Upon arriving in this country, in Mixteca, I was treated with human warmth, felt confident, and attended different programs such as family workshops and mentorship program. Currently, I receive support with the Fair Fares application. I am very grateful to Mixteca. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Laura Rivera, and I'm honored to speak before you today as a health coordinator and representative of Mixteca organization.
Sorry, can you just pull the microphone a little bit closer?
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay. As my colleague mentioned, Mixteca is deeply committed to serving immigrant older adults in our vibrant and diverse city. I represent an organization dedicated to ensuring that all members of our community, regardless of background or circumstance, have access to essential healthcare services. Today, I wish to address the critical importance of providing information about the NYC Care program to immigrant older adults. Our immigrant older adults are among the most vulnerable population in our city, facing unique challenges as they navigate healthcare systems often unfamiliar to them. Language and cultural barriers can create significant obstacles to accessing the care they need and deserve. As a healthcare advocate working directly with these communities, I have witnessed firsthand struggles faced by immigrant older adults in understanding their healthcare options and enrolling into programs like NYC Care. The NYC Care program represents a lifeline for many immigrant adults, offering comprehensive healthcare coverage and access to a network of primary care providers, specialists, and hospitals. I have witnessed firsthand the transformative impact that this access to healthcare can have on the lives of our immigrant older adults by connecting them with information about the NYC Care program and assisting them in enrolling and empowering the adults to take control of their health and well-being. Moreover, by fostering partnerships between community organizations and healthcare providers and government agencies, we can ensure that immigrant older adults receive the comprehensive support they need to thrive in our city. At Mixteca, we have made it our mission to bridge this gap by providing information about NYC Care to immigrant older adults in their native languages. Whether it's through community workshops, one-on-one consultations, or informational materials translated in indigenous languages, our community organization is committed to ensuring that every eligible individual understands their healthcare options and can make informed decisions about their health and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Chairs Hudson, Aviles, and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Amreen Basine, and I serve as a staff attorney to the Sikh Coalition, the country's largest Sikh civil rights organization. I come before you today to discuss the targeting of Sikhs and hate crimes. 5 cases in the past 2 years alone have targeted older or elderly Sikh men. In January 2022, a 58-year-old Sikh taxi driver was attacked, struck in the head and turban, called turban people, and told to go back to your country at JFK Airport. In April of 2022, Nirmal Singh, a 70-year-old Sikh man, was assaulted while on an early morning walk in the Richmond Hill neighborhood of Queens. Less than 10 days later, 2 additional men, Gulzar Singh, 45, and Sajjan Singh, 58, were both attacked and robbed in the same neighborhood. And in October of 2023, 66-year-old Jasmer Singh succumbed to his injuries after being assaulted following a car accident. During the course of the attack, he was called Turban Man by his assailant. Clearly, there's a significant issue at the intersection of aging, immigration, and violent hate crimes in our city. Our recommendations to address this urgent issue are as follows. First, we encourage the council to work with local law enforcement to ensure that translation services are available to all officers who are investigating crimes that may have a hate or bias component. Too often, details that may shed light on a perpetrator's motive are literally lost in translation when survivors or eyewitnesses have limited English proficiency. Second, the security of Sikh gurdwaras and other houses of worship remains a critical issue. City council members have funding for capital investments, and that funding could be put towards strengthening infrastructure, for example, security cameras that makes the areas around a given house of worship safer. And finally, we are broadly supportive of legislative efforts to compel more inclusive education in New York City, whether that be through inclusive curriculum measures, professional development for educators focused on cultural awareness, or bias-based bullying, or other means. We are eager to be a resource and a partner for both New York City schools and the council. Thank you for your consideration and for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to this panel. We appreciate it. We're going to move on to the next in-person panel. Thank you. At this time, we'll be calling up Kevin Koprovsky, Rachel Nechez, Elisa Tustian, and MJ Akma. While the next panel is coming up, I do want to encourage everyone to please submit written testimony. You can do so up to 72 hours after the conclusion of this hearing. You can do that at the email address is testimony@council.nyc.gov. I also want to just re-up the 2-minute time limit as we need to vacate the room at 1 o'clock and there are no free rooms. So please keep to the time limit. Thank you so much, and we'll be starting from your left when you're ready.
Is the red light on?
Hello?
Yeah. And you can pull it closer, too.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chairs Hudson and Aviles, for holding this really important hearing. My name is Kevin Koprovsky, and I'm the Director of Public Policy at Live On New York. Live On's membership includes more than 110 community-based nonprofits that provide core services which allow all New Yorkers to thrive in communities as we age, such as older adult centers, home-delivered meals program, affordable senior housing, NORCs, home care, case management. We essentially cover the entire DFTA portfolio, so if you ever need any information, we can get it to you as quickly as we can. I wanted to start with a little bit of background. We did survey our members to get some background information on this. The key thing that stood out is that our city's immigrant population, and especially our older immigrant population, is incredibly diverse, so it's really hard to boil down specifics, but we tried our best, and we're going to try to go through some things that sort of have been across the board. Number one, mental health needs differ particularly in older immigrant populations, and then if you segment it further, more recent immigrants score far more poorly on depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. So we think that it's very necessary to look into how long and how established communities are and provide targeted needs assessments to communities that are still establishing. As we found our members say that, there's a lot more issues in, recent immigrants that are older than more established immigrants. Secondarily, anti-Asian hate has exacerbated these feelings over many older adults throughout the cities, particularly in Asian communities, and that's something that needs to be dealt with on a particular level. Next, language services only cover the 10 languages required by existing statute. This leaves out an incredible amount of limited diffusion languages. 5 languages that we've heard off the top that really are needed are Hindi, Nepali, Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati, and there's an entire list, but those are just 5 that sort of stood out immediately. These language resources also don't take into account the literacy of many people who live in our city, because a lot of times Language Line and a lot of these resources that exist are done sort of academically, and they are not done colloquially. So even though we have in 10 languages resources, it doesn't actually go through. Sorry, I'm just going to try to get through the recommendations. Housing is a big issue. I know that's not, the newest thing in the world, but specifically for older adults, a lot of newer older adults are renting rooms in cramped apartments and basement, contributing to poor mental health outcomes and lower qualities of life. And one big thing that came up is remittance scams. We have a lot of anti-scam material out there, but not for remittance scams, which particularly affects older immigrants and has been becoming a huge issue very quickly. So just a quick list of recommendations. First of all of the solutions exist already. Our network is really, really good at doing this. They even try to, do with what they can. So, they do need more funding, but with the funding they have, they work very hard to solve the problems in the status quo. The first one, we need linguistically and culturally sensitive mental health services. And I know that people have said that, they exist in the status quo, but we need more freedom for our members to be able to provide the services they know work. So we need funding for like, I think it was mentioned by a couple of council members, a little more flexibility in mental health programs. Next, we need new housing models. Our members have been providing new housing models in the status quo. India Home has a co-living project that meets both the social health and housing needs of older adults, but HPD has been a little bit hesitant to jump into that. That's something that can really provide new housing for people and meet their needs. Next, our centers can provide translations, interpretations, and different materials, but they're just not given the resources for it and usually aren't included in conversations about how to provide these resources. So including them and funding them in these services is key to provide linguistically and culturally appropriate translations, interpretations, and materials that meet communities who don't have the highest proficiency in literacy. Last one is adding remittance scams to existing lists of materials and programs. We have a lot of really good existing materials, but remittance scams need to be added before this becomes a huge problem. Since it's not on lists and since it's not being fought actively, it's becoming bigger as sort of this is happening. And lastly, we do support the pre-considered legislation that would provide more information on NYC Care throughout the city. We think that this is critical. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify, and sorry I went over time.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Thank you for modeling, Kevin, the kind of concise information we were hoping this administration would provide. Clear arguments, information, and clear recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if you ever need any more, please reach out.
Thank you. MJ?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is MJ Okmo with SAGE. We provide LGBTQ+ affirming aging services for people aged 60 and older at older adult centers in Midtown, Harlem, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, and through a partnership with the Pride Center of Staten Island, with services currently available in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese. We also provide specialized services for older people living with HIV and transgender elders starting at age 50. Immigrants are the majority of our city's older adult population. New York is also a destination for LGBTQ+ asylum seekers from around the world who are fleeing prosecution in their home countries. It also must be stated that experiences of discrimination on HIV status also discourages individuals from seeking testing and treatment for fear of being denied entry or placed on deportation proceedings, especially given the fact that prior to 2010, the U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act explicitly prohibited people with HIV from entering the country. All of these factors compound and create pronounced mental health needs. At the same time, these elders are often hard to reach as they're extremely isolated and distrustful of services, especially if they're also LGBTQ+ or living with HIV. Because of these barriers, SAGE really works to develop deep trust with these populations in order to serve them. We do this in part by working with local partners that have influence and trust in immigrant communities, expanding the languages spoken at our center, and through community food pantries and grab-and-go meals, which are really important as a gateway to services. SAGE strongly supports the pre-considered legislation that promotes NYC Care services at all NYC aging contracted service sites, and also has a few additional recommendations. First, provide OACs with more flexibility to serve food catered to the communities they serve, which is instrumental to building trust to connect people to further services. Second, support and development of linguistically and culturally sensitive mental health services that are LGBTQ+ and HIV competent, and explicitly recognize the unique experience of older immigrants and those seeking asylum. And third, establish direct coordination among city agencies to ensure that community partners that serve immigrants and/or older adults under any city agencies can seamlessly connect with each other and provide clear pathways to services. More information on these will be provided in my submitted written testimony. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Elisa Mercedes Tastian, and I am the supervising attorney at the Senior Law Project at Volunteers of Legal Service. VOLS was established in 1984, and we partner with private attorneys to provide free legal services to low-income New Yorkers to help fill the justice gap. VOLS Senior Law Project serves low-income New Yorkers age 60+ by providing powers of attorney and healthcare proxies and other essential life planning documents. We have had many clients this year we've had at least about 5 actually, who are over 100 years old. And one of our over 100-year-olds, she needed a POA, a power of attorney, so that someone else could sign her lease for her, and that way she would avoid homelessness. Her grip was not as strong as it was. Planning for the future is a hard process. It is a process that forces older adults to face their mortality and think seriously about who they trust to do these things for them. And through our program, we think it's very important to have legal services providers that explicitly acknowledge the unique challenges of planning for your future and how immigrants particularly face that challenge. With our outreach to Latina and Asian immigrants, we have noticed that our immigrants more often than our non-immigrant clients have no family in the United States. We receive questions during our clinics throughout the 5 boroughs. Recently, one of our clients wanted to know how to name her best friend in New York City as a healthcare and financial proxy because she had no families here, and how to leave her modest savings to her niece in China. Another client asked similarly about a nephew in Colombia. We help our clients to make sure their last wishes are fulfilled. As well, we have seen that friends of family members step in as caregivers sometimes. And so we do outreach specifically to caregivers, but we stress to clients the importance of having these plans set in place beforehand, because we have had situations such as in the pandemic where a client's friend had passed away and he was in the morgue for months. All of that could have been avoided if he had had a document stating that his friend could handle his remains. But instead, we had to chase authorizations from relatives in Cuba, and the body was in the morgue for months. Just by understanding our laws better, we can help clients. And so we ask that you please continue to support legal services that is specifically targeting language access to our immigrant populations.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Rachel Netches, the data researcher at the Center for an Urban Future, an independent think tank focused on creating a stronger and more inclusive economy in New York. Thank you to Chair Hudson and Chair Aviles, members of both committees, for the opportunity to testify. A decade ago, the Center for an Urban Future published the first comprehensive report to document the fast-growing population of older immigrants across the 5 boroughs. We've since published several other reports about the challenges facing older immigrants and the opportunities to tap their many strengths. Our latest research shows that immigrants are now the majority of the city's older adult population, representing 52.2% of all seniors. That's 726,000 people. Older immigrants have propelled this growth, making up 66% of the additional older New Yorkers in the last decade. Our research at CUF demonstrates that this population has also been getting poorer. Citywide, there are 160,000 immigrant older adults living in poverty, or 22% of all immigrant seniors. In contrast, only 14% of US-born seniors live in poverty. In addition, older immigrants can often be worse off with less in retirement savings, Social Security benefits, and facing language and cultural barriers that often pose as challenges in receiving government supports. In 2020, we published a blueprint including 63 policy ideas that would help the city plan for this change, and I recommend you check them out. The Department for the Aging faces a budget cut of nearly $40 million next year. Full funding should also be coupled with renewed efforts to pursue innovation in services that reflect these diverse needs. Providers should have flexibility to partner with organizations tailored to serve immigrant populations. And key city agencies outside of DFTA also must do the same. We also recommend launching a major new initiative to reduce poverty among older New Yorkers, undertaking a citywide campaign to enroll them in benefits programs and increasing funding for older adult services to keep pace with the growth of this population as well as the rise in these unmet needs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I shared with you a longer written testimony that has new 2022 data, updated from the data that you were referencing today.
Great, thank you so much, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to this panel. I'd love to introduce you to MOYA and DFTA agencies. Perhaps you can also participate in the cabinet for older adults, and they can read your report. Thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
I'd like to reiterate that written testimony may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of the hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. With that, we'll call up our next in-person panel. We'll hear from Otrice Wildman, Kishan Raisingani, and Marina Lysenko.
When you're ready to speak, please press.
And you may begin whenever you're ready.
Good day, namaste, namaskara. Respected committees on the aging and immigration, council members, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kishan Raisingani. I have been member of India Home for a long time. It is a home away from home. It is my pleasure to talk to you all on this beautiful day. Migrants and immigrants come to this country, to the land of opportunity and the land of promise. These migrants work hard and suffer hardship. They endure problems of social, economic, political, and financial nature. The violence, separation, stress, and fear of deportation poses difficulties in their day-to-day life. Not too long ago, I had a personal incident I faced on the New York City MTA subway of a stranger pushing and shoving me on the platform. It was not regular pushing and shoving. It was really hard that I almost fell down. I almost came to confront him, but looking at my life, I let him go. Due to that, India Home took swift, fast, and immediate action of providing safety trainings at different centers for self-defense, conducted by reputed organizations. India Home also has kept us physically, mentally, and emotionally strong and healthy by doing classes of yoga and exercise at different centers. The problems faced by older immigrants, including social, poverty, education, housing, and employment. To solve these problems or find a solution to these problems, senior centers can help, guide, or advise them. Even undocumented immigrants have a right of speech, right of freedom, right of religion, and right of privacy. They have rights to be treated as fairly and equally as a U.S. citizen. We request the Office of the Mayor, the Committees on Aging and Immigration, and the council members for more grants, more funding, and more money by which India Home can serve the seniors and solve social problems and help local communities. As you know, cost of living and inflation is skyrocketing. Without your help, India Home cannot marching ahead. Thank you all for you listening to me today and giving me the wonderful opportunity to speak to you on this great occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson Crystal Hudson and members of the New York City Council Committee on Aging. Thank you for this opportunity to deliver testimony on the needs of immigrant older adults in New York City. My name is Marina Lysenko, Director of Knickerbocker Village Newark Senior Services for Hamilton Madison House, a settlement house that has served the residents of Manhattan's Lower East Side and Chinatown since 1898. The programs we provide address the needs of Asian American non-English speaking vulnerable, underserved older adults and their families, the majority of whom are immigrants. The immigrant senior population is growing rapidly in New York, and we observed a deficit in New York in senior services. It is important to support the growth of social service organizations to guarantee linguistically and culturally proficient senior services to meet the needs of a progressively diverse immigrant senior population in New York City. I am an immigrant myself, and I have served vulnerable, underserved immigrant seniors and their families, as well as people who were born and aged in United States for 22 years. As frontline employee, every day I see the needs of people we serve do not decrease. Every day, life unfolds new challenges for them, and they struggle to address them on their own. So, I would like to mention some barriers to independent living. Linguistic isolation creates a knowledge gap and difficulties to navigating the system in order to apply for supportive benefits or make adjustments to the existing benefit package. This increases hospitalizations and nursing home stays. The constantly growing demand for senior services makes it challenging to support seniors with the existing senior services and resources. We do not have enough bilingual manpower to deliver the services. Raising housing costs impact access to healthy food and healthy care. Seniors prioritize shelter expenses over food and health care. Barriers to long-term managed care at home care and home care services across different populations deprive seniors from being independent and living with dignity and aging in place. Hamilton Medicine Houses programs serve more than 5,000 older adults per year and meet a wide range of their needs through congregate meal programs, social services, after-school programs, early childhood education, and mental health services. We address growing food insecurity we see in our older adults by offering well-balanced, affordable, nutritious food every day at our programs, as well as by hand-delivering grocery bags from our bi-weekly community food pantry. We provide culturally and linguistically proficient social services that ensure that older adult immigrants have access to supportive resources and health care. Because the immigrant population is growing, financial support for senior services should grow as well. Older adult immigrants live in fear that they might lose support because of multiple budget cuts to senior services. I hope that my testimony will help to better understand the challenges that both older adult immigrants and native-born seniors and native-born citizens continue to face. We want them to be an integral part of New York City, live healthy and productive lives without fear, and share their wisdom with the new generation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning, and we look forward to continue our partnership with the Council to protect services that are vital to well-being of so many New Yorkers who are older adults. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you, Chairs Hudson and Aviles, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ortrice Wildman, and I am honored to serve the older adult community of New York City as a social caseworker at Encore Community Services within the Aging Through Arts Center. I've worked in aging services for more than 15 years, ranging from transportation and meal delivery to case assistance. I've been at the forefront ensuring the well-being and dignity of our city's older adults. Today, I'm here to talk about the needs for the full funding of our older adult centers. Encore Community Services is one of New York City's largest aging services provider, offering the full range of services from home-delivered meals, housing, OACs, and case management. Some challenges we have been facing at our centers are housing. We have seen a significant rise in the number of older adults living in inadequate housing conditions. Some are unable to access the spaces they have called home for decades safely. These challenges are compounded when living on fixed incomes. Older adults are facing harassment from their landlords who want them out to rent their apartments for market value. We've also experienced an increase in the number of homeless older adults who are seeking support in our center. The increase in mental health crisis is also affecting our members. Many of our older adults at our centers are experiencing mental illness in some form via dementia, depression, or anxiety. Staff at our center are often among the first to recognize these signs and provide resources and support. This reinforces the point that our facilities are not merely spaces for recreation, they are crucial hubs for the physical, mental, and social well-being of our members. In light of the proposed $18 million budget cut, it is crucial to acknowledge that threatening these centers would not only diminish the quality of service, but could lead to the erosion of the very support systems that uphold the dignity and well-being of our older members. If the justification for budget reduction is underutilization, I urge the city not to cut, but instead redistribute that money to where our older adults tell us they need it the most. As a caseworker serving an enrollment of close to 2,000 active members, I am usually booked a month in advance. Instead of cutting funding, why not add another caseworker to our center? With an additional caseworker, our utilization will go up. Instead of insisting that we can only give 1 meal a day, why not allow Encore to provide 2 or 3 meals a day to the homeless older adult who needs that additional support? I'd be remiss to say, rather than cutting our older adult center's budget by $18 million, how about paying caseworkers at AOC's a livable wage, rather than the poverty wages we are contracted by from the city right now? We should not be working full-time and still qualify for SNAP benefits. I urge the City Council to recognize the multifaceted role of older adult centers in the lives of New York City seniors. The proposed budget cuts represent a step back from our collective responsibility to care for those who have contributed so much to our community. Fully funding these centers is a testament to our city's commitment to ensuring that older adults live their later years with respect, care, and the enrichment they deserve. Thank you for your time and for your ongoing commitment to the older adults who built this city.
Thank you so much. I hope you'll also return, this goes for everyone, but I hope you'll return and share those same sentiments at our preliminary budget hearing and also our executive budget hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much to this panel. We'll be moving on to our next and last in-person panel. Just as a reminder, each panelist will have 2 minutes to testify, and your testimony should be relevant to the hearing topic. At this time, I'm calling up Mo Mokbul Hossain, Kar Oni, Jane Willis, and Christopher Leon Johnson. Apologies, Mohammed. Apologies. Okay, please.
Yeah. All right. So good morning, good afternoon. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. Thank you to the 2 chairs, Alexa Aviles, Aviles. I believe that's your name, right? I'm sorry, I don't want to be disrespectful.
No, Aviles.
Aviles and Crystal Hudson. So it's crazy that, you know, this topic is about protecting older adults, and we all need to protect our older adults. There's a big issue in New York City that's called crime, right, against older adults. Now, the big issue that I see here is these nonprofits that spoke before us, mainly NICE, mainly ELMCOR, mainly the Sheik Coalition, and there's a lot of these other nonprofits that know what's going on, and all they care about is keeping those foundation money keep on rolling in, like the Ford Foundation and Open Societies and all these other dirty, corrupt foundations that all they care about is allowing this crime to happen in the cities like here, and they have these elected officials cow down to the agenda. The way you protect older adults in New York City is bail reform. You have to repeal bail reform. The city council has to really push the repealing of bail reform. Now, if you don't want to push bail reform, I get it. You need to help to tell the state assembly and the state senate and the governor to put more laws in to protect older adults from when they get assaulted, harassed, and threatened. You don't see that at all. And it's all about votes. It's all about keeping the votes in certain districts, like in Corona and in Sunset Park. That's all it's about. It's disgusting. So like I said, we need to repeal the bail reform. We have to put more laws in to protect these older adults. And we have to tell these nonprofits to do the right thing instead of trying to worry about the next payout from the Ford Foundation Open Societies that are for crime and that's for the assault of older people. So that's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Next.
Good afternoon. Greetings to the Council Committee on Aging and Committee on Immigration. I am Mokbul Hussain, a senior member of India Homes Deshi Senior Center since 2015. I will be testifying today on the priorities of South Asian older adult and the challenges faced, including acculturation challenges, housing, languages, accessing benefits, and hate crimes. Every nation has a culture of its own. Similarly, we have our own language, days, food habits, manner of eating, speaking, mood of behavior, social values, customs, religion, art, etc., which are part and parcel of our culture. Western culture has introduced us to the people, society, education, history, and culture of the Western world. It has also helped to enrich our civilization by accepting the good things of Western civilization. However, there pose challenges when other cultures have to acculturate to the Western world. Acculturation is a process through which a person or group from one culture comes to adopt the practices and values of another culture, while still retaining their own distant culture. With the rich cultures and traditions our older adult communities come to this country with, there are expectations to make compromises on them and to adopt to a new set of values. From inter-independence to independence, from collectivism to individualism, from intergenerational houses to prioritization of nuclear families. Older adults coming from South Asia are expecting to adjust to these new values with little support. Furthermore, not having adequate financial resources and proficient English literacy increases the stress and isolation they face in an already isolating world of older adults. Moreover, hate crimes experiences in the senior communities have kept our older adults on edge and in fear. For the challenges South Asian older adults face here, such as language access, hate crimes, housing, accessing benefit, acculturation, all kinds of things, we receive accessible help through India Home. India Home provides language learning applications for benefits, information sharing, as well as enriching arts, recreation, and culturally competent meal programming, all of which makes us feel at home if we belong and make us feel improved. I am so proud to be a member of this center and feel proud to be a member of India Home. I ask for your advocacy and support in increasing funding to older adult centers such as ours to help continue providing life-affirming service for people like myself. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify on the needs of my community. Have a good day too.
Thank you so much.
I guess this is on, yes. When it's red. Hi, everybody. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jane Willis, and thank you, Chair Aviles and Chair Hudson, for listening to my testimony. And I'm sort of carrying this message from some folks that I met at Floyd Bennett Field Tent Shelter, and they were reluctant, of course, to come and give the message themselves. So I also want you to know that I'm going to be sharing the content of my testimony with my Congress member Dan Goldman, who is on the Homeland Security Committee and absolutely needs to hear this as well. So during the cold snaps in January and February, Gowanus Mutual Aid alerted myself and my neighbors to the need for warm clothing for asylum seekers. When I took warm clothing to the Floyd Bennett Field Tent Shelter and the Hall Street Shelter, I had the privilege of meeting a couple of young families from Latin America. As I chatted in the cold with the families, all of them told me that they came to America and to New York to work and to become good citizens. They told me they do not want to be a burden on the system. They want to work. I stayed in touch with the two families. The dads told me of their prior work experience in their countries of origin. One dad has the dream of opening his own bakery as he's a pastry chef. The other dad is a fine woodworker, his job in Ecuador, which has become a dangerous country to try to raise a family in. My husband passed away in June, and he was the repair guy in our house, and several things afterward in my apartment broke. And I set up a barter, I set up a barter system with the woodworking dad. If he could come fix my broken window shutter and kitchen cabinet, I would cook his family some soup and hot food, as the food in the shelter is inedible, and his work was impeccable. And his wife and kids enjoyed the meals I cooked. Why are we not doing everything to scaffold these folks into the workforce so that they can do the work they know how to do and want very much to do, to become productive human beings on the path to citizenship? We must expedite the work permit process immediately so they can and become self-supporting. They don't want to leech off our city services. Ukrainian refugees were granted work permit status quickly. Why are newcomers from Latin America and Africa and China forced to wait in uncertainty? They're stranded and forced to rely on triage and shelters for medical care, food, clothing, and daily supplies. We need their talent, stamina, and intelligence. They need to be seen as the assets they are to our city. Please expedite the work permit process for all of these newcomers with no restrictions on any country of origin. This is my urgent request. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you very much to this in-person panel. At this time, if there's anyone in the room who would like to testify but has not had the opportunity to do so yet, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms. Seeing none, we will be moving on to virtual panelists at this time. If you are speaking on Zoom, you'll have 2 minutes for your testimony. And just as a reminder to everyone to please submit written testimony, which can be submitted up to 72 hours after the conclusion of this hearing to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Virtual folks testifying, please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to call time before you begin your testimony. We are going to start with Xinghui Zheng. Please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to call time before you begin your testimony.
You may begin.
Okay. Chairs Hudson and Aviles and members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Xinghui Zhang, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Housing Street Center at University Settlement on the Lower East Side. Each year, University Settlement partners with 40,000 New Yorkers in Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn through programming for all ages. For 18 years, the Housing Street Center has provided programming for older adults, mostly immigrants, Cantonese and Mandarin speakers from all 5 boroughs. At HSC, we work to reframe aging as a positive process and provide our older adult participants with the knowledge and skills to age well. We see that immigrant older adults need social services and supports, including increased access to affordable, healthy, and culturally appropriate food. They need help navigating complicated bureaucratic systems and connecting them to city services like SNAC, access to medical insurance, and qualifying for home health care services. Our participants need safe transportation options. Many older AAPI immigrants are afraid to ride the subway. Our older adults need affordable housing. Our participants want the independence and communities that affordable senior housing can bring. They also need community and wellness programs in languages that they speak and offered by people they trust, like the ones we and so many other nonprofits provide. We would love to offer more intergenerational programming to our older adults feel more connected and seen. Finally, we need to recognize the different needs of younger older adults. The demographic categories of older adults includes the largest ranges of years. It includes 60 years old to even over 100 years old. We should divide programming for more target age groups. For example, many older adults want to continue working, but their skills and experience may be vastly different depending on their age. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to be calling Arash Azizada. Please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to call time before you begin your testimony.
You may begin.
And Arash is not on. Moving on to Samantha McBride. Please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to call time before you begin your testimony.
You may begin.
And finally, calling Yesenia Mata. Please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to call time before you begin your testimony.
You may begin.
At this time, if there is anyone on Zoom wishing to testify that has not heard their name called, please indicate that you would like to testify using the Zoom raise hand function. Seeing no hands, turning back to the chairs for closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Just to reiterate some of our opening remarks, over the past decade, New York City's older adult population has become more diverse than ever, with the number of Black, Hispanic, and Asian older adults outpacing the older white population, and the population rate of immigrant older adults in the city growing faster than that of New York-born older adults. This topic was certainly an important one for us to address, and we thank everyone for their testimony. I also just want to note, as Chair Aviles and I have been chatting throughout the hearing, how disappointing it is that we continue to receive inadequate answers from the administration and from various agencies. I think it's common practice that these agencies are siloed, that they don't share information between each other, and we all live intersectional lives. I think it's really important that these agencies start to serve and provide services and resources as if we all, live intersectional lives. And we cannot continue to hear from agencies who say it's the responsibility of another agency to provide a very specific piece of data when everybody should have access to that. So with that, unless Chair Aviles has anything to add, I will adjourn the meeting.
I would just add, thank you, Chair Hudson, that the rate of growth for this community should also parallel the rate of growth of investment in the supports that we need to make sure that New York City's aging population ages with dignity and ages in place, and that the investment that they made in this city, we are making in them. And so I would urge the administration that they must do everything in their power, coordination, and grow the investment in older New York, in older New Yorkers, many whom are immigrants, at the same pace and with the same urgency with which this population is growing. And so thank you to everyone for their time and their work today, and we will continue to dig into this issue that is so important to our city's present and future. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. This hearing is now adjourned.